South Jersey's play-by-play home for the Eagles,
Touchdown!
Sixers, and Flyers.
He scored!
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, WENJ HD Millville, Atlantic City, a Town Square media station. This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Now, live inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, here's Mike Gill.
Well, the news just came down moments ago. Joel Embiid will miss the game tonight. We kind of thought that when he was listed as doubtful yesterday. But now we know there will be no Joe. And how long will he be out? Well, we're here to find out. A lot of rhyming today. Mike McGarry coming up in 40 minutes. What's it mean for the Sixers with Embiid out? Is this series heading back to Washington? Paul Hudrick will join us at 3:20. Geoff Mosher has football at 4. And, well, it's pretty big news if you ask me. I was having this conversation with a buddy of mine last night who is, by the way, extremely anti-Sixers in terms of process. He hated the process. So anything they do is the worst thing ever. So we got into this conversation last night regarding the Sixers and whether or not they could beat the Wizards without Joel Embiid. And I said, yeah, they'll probably beat the Wizards without Joel Embiid. But I don't know that they beat Atlanta without Joel Embiid. To which spiraled off into this, well, you did all this, you can't even beat Atlanta. If Joel Embiid goes out, will they beat Atlanta? I don't know. I can't sit here and say they would definitively beat Atlanta. You know, the Sixers did what they did, and everybody followed them. Jake Fisher's been on our show a couple of times. He wrote the book, Built to Lose, How the NBA's Tanking Era Changed the League Forever. You know who one of those teams were? The Atlanta Hawks. You know, the Atlanta Hawks are a team that has not been very good for quite some time now. This is a team that went through the ringer. This is a team that, look, essentially, like, the fact that the Sixers use this word process is really what has people up in a tizzy. If they never called it anything, if they never actually marketed it, we wouldn't have the same view of it as everybody else. But they were kind of the first that did this. Well, Atlanta, the last couple of years, yeah, they didn't win 19, 18, and 10. They won 24, 29, and 20. They kind of were the worst team in the Eastern Conference for 3 years. And they landed a couple of big-time players that have helped them get to this spot. They are kind of where the Sixers were in 2017. All of a sudden, you know, they have Trae Young on that team, and it's a team that Trae Young was there. They weren't very good the first year that he was there. They won 29 games. Last year they won 20 games with Trae Young, and now here they are with 41. Same with the Sixers. When they got Joel Embiid, they won 28 games. The next year they went to 50-some games. Getting a player of that magnitude changes everything for you. So, yeah, losing Joel Embiid, that's like essentially the Lakers saying, you know what, LeBron James is out the rest of the way. That's like the Bucks saying, you know what, Giannis Antetokounmpo's not playing the rest of the playoffs. That's like Kawhi Leonard not playing the rest of the way for the Clippers. That's like Nikola Jokic basically not playing the rest of the way. Yeah, Jamal Murray went out, but they still have Jokic. If Joel Embiid goes out, that's a problem. That's a big problem for them. And you would say, well, they have Ben Simmons. Yeah, Ben Simmons should be, and Tobias Harris, enough to get them through this series and maybe beat the Atlanta Hawks. I don't know that they beat the Hawks. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't. I'm not sticking my neck out there on that series yet because it hasn't even started yet. That being said, if you don't have Joel Embiid, you ain't winning the title. It's as simple as that. Now, I don't know that he's going to miss a significant amount of time. The injury that Joel Embiid has is a meniscus tear. Now, these things are a little tricky. An MRI has revealed that he has a small meniscus tear on his right knee and is basically listed as day-to-day. According to Adrian Wojnarowski, they are managing swelling and pain in the knee, and that will play a significant role in how soon he can return to the floor. The Sixers, in a statement, said the injury will be managed with a physical therapist and treatment program. What does all that mean? Who knows with the Sixers? Text message. Asked LeBron how it's going without Anthony Davis. Right, exactly. The Anthony Davis is different, though. Yeah, ask LeBron how it's going without Anthony Davis. That Lakers team, that shows you how good LeBron is, to be honest with you. What I take from that is that's how good LeBron is. Still, by the way, it's amazing that LeBron's still that good. At what, 36 years old, he's still that good. That's unbelievable. But the rest of that Lakers team isn't very good. This is why I said, when they got LeBron and Anthony Davis went there, I was skeptical that they could win. Now, they ended up winning a title last year, but it was a bubble title. And I think we're seeing that the bubble title, look at the Heat. That bubble title's a little different. So the Lakers snuck that title in there. And look, by the way, the Lakers were good last year. They might have won the title wherever they played. But we're looking at that bubble a little differently last year. I know the Bucks sure are. The Bucks are certainly looking at the bubble a little different than everybody else did. That was the best social media burn I've ever seen, I think. The Bucks, when they swept the Heat, were like, yeah, this wasn't the bubble. That Lakers team without LeBron James is, Anthony Davis, I've talked about it. He's a tremendous talent, but he ain't the best player on the team. Come on. He had a chance to have his own franchise, couldn't do it, and bailed on them. And now he's here, and Anthony Davis, good player, not the best player on a team type of player. The Lakers lose LeBron. They might not beat the Suns. Look, the Suns are a good team. They are. But I don't think anybody out there thinks, man, this Suns team's going to win an NBA title. They might make a nice run. So the Sixers without Joel Embiid, I can't sit here and tell you that I have any optimism at all. Do I think they'll win this series? Yeah, I think they'll win tonight. Even without Joel Embiid, I think the Sixers will beat the Wizards tonight. What say you? 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. And then we peel the onion. Now we peel the onion and we say, okay, no Joel Embiid, now what? Well, who starts at center? I think that's the first question. Do you go with Mike Scott again? Do you go with Dwight Howard? Do you just decide to go with some three-guard lineups? You go with George Hill in the starting lineup and go with Ben at the center spot. How do the Sixers, right? How do the Sixers manage this situation without Joel Embiid, which could be, quite frankly, who knows? It could be more than just one game. You hope that it's okay, that even if they lost tonight, Friday night, maybe he's ready to go. If not, you're hoping, okay, by Sunday. No idea at this stage of the game. No idea at this stage of the game where this all kind of sets. They say day to day, with the Sixers, that could mean month to month with that team. I hate to say it, but anytime you say day to day, I almost feel worse. I almost feel worse when they say day to day with this, especially with Joel. How many times have we heard Joel day to day and he ends up missing a long time? 609-403-0973. Here's the thing. The Sixers should win this series tonight. They go into a game without Joel Embiid. They know Joel Embiid is out. I think they'll do a fine job of putting together a game plan. I think Harris will play much better. I'm not even that concerned about Simmons and his aggressiveness. I think when Embiid is out, you see a different Simmons just by proxy because there's more room for him to kind of roam. You know, Ben knows his place. When Joel's here, I got to get out of the way. When Joel's not there, and I know that from Jump Street, I have that room to roam. Now, you might say, well, then Joel was out. Why didn't Simmons do it the other night? I think they were still kind of sticking to the game plan. Go through Tobias Harris, dribble drive, kick out threes. Curry's not making threes. I think Simmons needs to be more aggressive than he was with 5 shots. There's no question about it. But with Joel not playing right from the start, I think you will see a different Ben Simmons. And I think you will see I just think you'll see a better – the big thing of this is I think you'll see a better Tobias Harris tonight. And I think that could be the big difference. But you can make an argument that Bradley Beal now becomes the best player in the series, right? You can make a strong argument. I don't even know that needs to be an argument. You can now make the argument that Bradley Beal becomes the best player in the series. So now Washington has the best player. Who's the second best player in this group? If you are drafting a team, who's the draft? You probably say Bradley Beal. Now, Embiid's not in this draft because he's not playing tonight. You probably say Bradley Beal. There's a strong argument you can make that Westbrook would be the next pick. I mean, I think Embiid is just that much better that he would be the first guy. You would say Beal would be 2. I don't know. You might say Westbrook or Ben Simmons 3. It's close. I mean, those 2 guys are probably right in the same area. Tobias Harris. And then after that, okay, you got Danny Green and Curry. Now, them losing Bertans is a loss, but I think Hachimura, you got to put him into the mix. Gafford's been a nice piece for them. Young, athletic guy. All of a sudden, you take Joel Embiid out, and they've got, Beal is a legit player. The rest of the team is the problem there. They don't have a lot of depth. You take Joel Embiid off this team, though, look, everybody would say, well, if that's the case, you're not that good. You take the best player of Joel Embiid's magnitude off any team, they're having the same conversation. The Lakers won the title last year, but if you took LeBron off that team, they ain't winning the title. Heck, the Miami Heat went to the finals last year. If you take Jimmy Butler off that team, they ain't getting out of the first round. And you could say that for every team. So this isn't a slight that, hey, if you lose Joel Embiid, are you really as good? Yes, Joel Embiid makes you that good. Losing him makes you different. Bob Heisen checks in. Bob says Reed at the 5. Bob, they're not playing Reed at the 5. Obviously, people like Paul Reed. He's become the guy that everybody likes. He's an athletic guy. He's, very active. Obviously, Doc Rivers doesn't trust him. They're not starting Paul Reed at the 5 in a playoff game. And if they do, God bless them. I don't have a problem with it. They're just not doing that. Jalen, my Lord, did you see what Dame did last night? Yeah, we'll get to that. James Beeman, Sixers in a blowout tonight. Full capacity crowd will be the difference. Yeah, the crowd's back. I think you'll see a much better Ben. Although I'm interested to see how the crowd treats Ben Simmons tonight. I'm interested to see how the crowd reacts to Ben Simmons tonight. He has had the weirdest relationship, especially over the last couple of weeks with the regular season and the way these playoffs have kind of gone. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Look, this is not a slight on the Sixers and the number 1 seed and what they accomplished. You can't make any argument, okay? None. There's no argument you can make that says the Sixers are not in a better spot as a franchise than they were pre-2013, right? But part of the reason why they are in a much better place today than they were pre-2013 is because they have Joel Embiid. People say, you had all these draft picks. Yeah, and you needed all the draft picks because they came right out and admitted, we're going to make mistakes. This is an inexact science. We're going to make mistakes. But if we get the guy, that guy can be the guy that takes us where we want to go. They got that guy. His name's Joel Embiid. If he doesn't play in the rest of this series, I think they'll win tonight. So I don't want to talk about him not playing in this series. And if they lose tonight, it starts to get interesting. Doc Rivers lost a 3-1 series last year. All that stuff becomes interesting. They'll win this series, though. They'll win this series. I feel pretty confident in saying that. But I'm not sure they beat the Hawks, man. And you talk about, wow, Clint Capella is a problem. I think Capella is going to be a problem in the series anyway, even with Joel Embiid. He's an athletic big. He is a very athletic guy who can score and rebound, and he defends. You see what they're doing. I know the Knicks are a pretty poor offensive team, but Capella is a center who can defend something Washington does not have. He is tough. He will bang. I think Joel Embiid is I know Joel Embiid's a better player than Clint Capella, but I don't know that you're going to get a 36-point outbreak from Joel Embiid. And God forsakes, if he doesn't play, you got a problem. You don't have a center. There's a problem. Dwight Howard has been a great find in the role that he's in. If you ask him to expand that role, not so good. You see what happened over the years. You remember when the Sixers signed Scott Williams? He was a role player for the championship Bulls teams. And then the Sixers said, well, look, in 15 minutes, look what he does for them. If we play him 36 minutes, he might double that output. That's not how it goes. Dwight Howard is very good in the role that he's in. They can't play him starter minutes, and they don't have another option. Look, the Sixers went all in with Joel Embiid as the centerpiece. And Doc Rivers, by the way, accentuated it. In the past, I think Brett Brown wanted to walk the tightrope of, is it Joel's team? Is it Ben's team? Is it Ben's team? Is it Joel's team? I don't want to pick a guy, so we'll kind of try to make it both their teams. No. Doc Rivers, give him credit. This is where the coaching matters. He came in and said, Joel, this is your team. Ben, you're going to be the complimentary guy. Okay? Ben, you're the complimentary player. We're not going to ask you to score. But in the big moments, this is going to be Joel's team. I don't think Brett wanted to make that declaration. So when you built a team on Joel Embiid, look, now you got a lot tied to them. And if he gets hurt, which is possible, he's got a history of injuries if you haven't noticed. That's what happens. So, yeah, this isn't a slight on the Sixers. This is who they are. They painted they hitched the wagon to Joel Embiid, and it's not their fault. It's not a bad thing. It's what they should have done. But the repercussion becomes, you lose Joel Embiid, you're in trouble. And I don't think they're in trouble in this series. And quite frankly, if they play the Knicks, they might have some issues. Because the Knicks are a feisty defensive team who have given the Sixers some issues this year. And now you have two teams that struggle to score. Philadelphia without Joel Embiid is going to struggle to score. 609-403. 0973. Such it is. Sports Bash brought to you by Clark's Moving Storage, South Jersey. For your next local or long-distance move, Clark's Moving and Storage is your first call. They're dependable and always show up online at clarksmoving.net. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. And don't forget, you can watch the show live through multiple platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Just follow us on those three platforms. Search 973 ESPN, and you can watch the show live. Coming up today, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. You know Mike's going to have something to say about this. You're going to want to stick around. Paul Hudrick inside the Sixers. How will the Sixers replace Joel Embiid? That is next here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. If you are watching the show, we will get to your comments here in this next segment. Also, the text board is open, 609-403-0973. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. If you're watching the show, you will see that I have my University of Penn t-shirt on today. Hopefully I don't think they use Penn medicine, but hopefully the medical doctors will get Joel Embiid's knee back to speed so he can get back in a quick and safe fashion. Over on the text board, 609-403-0973. Mike, I want to see Simmons step up tonight. No, everybody wants to see Simmons fail tonight. That's all what we all want that. Of course we want to see Simmons step up tonight. Joel Embiid's out. This is the night where you would say, look, Ben, we don't ask you to score. Tonight we need you to score a little bit more, all right? You're getting about 12. That's okay. I don't ask you to. If I'm Doc Rivers, I'm sitting down Ben Simmons before the game, and I say, Ben, look, I don't ask you to score. You don't need to score. But tonight with Ben out, with Joel out, I'm going to need to ask you to step up a little bit more in the scoring department. I don't need, I'm not asking you to score 25 points, but with Joel out, I'm going to probably need you to score a little bit more tonight. That's all. And I think Simmons over the years, when Joel has been out for the full game, that has pretty much worked. Simmons has been a much more aggressive player without Joel Embiid. Now, the other night, he was not. For whatever reason, in the game, when Joel Embiid left, he certainly could have been more aggressive, and he was not. The text message goes on to say, when the number one guy goes down, the number two guy has to carry the load. Well, this is where I would cut you off a little bit there and say the number two guy on the offensive end of the floor for the Sixers is not Ben Simmons. It's Tobias Harris. And I agree with you. When Joel Embiid goes down, Tobias Harris has to carry the load. So if you want Simmons to be that guy, you're going to be disappointed. Tobias Harris has to be the guy tonight. Tobias Harris is the number two scorer on this team, if you haven't noticed. Ben Simmons is not the number two scorer on the team. In fact, I would go as far to say that Ben Simmons is almost the fifth option on offense. Their offense is essentially Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, the two guys shooting threes, and Ben Simmons in the open court. That's kind of the pecking order. And then whatever comes off the bench is different. But I'm talking about in the starting lineup. Their pantheon of how they get their points, if you look at their scoring, right, you take a look at what the Sixers do scoring-wise. You have Joel Embiid scores. He's the number one option. Harris is clearly the number two option. That's not even debatable. Ben Simmons is the third highest leading scorer on the team. But when you put Curry and Green together, they average about 18 points a game. Those two as a duo, it's really Embiid 1, Harris 2, Curry and Green shooting the 3 as the third option. And I would say Ben Simmons just creating open court, putbacks, dunks, tip-ins, all that kind of stuff. He would be really like the fourth option. And, Shake Milton, by the way, Shake Milton was the fourth highest scorer on this team this season. He averaged 13 points a game. That was more than Seth Curry. That was more than Danny Green. So again, let's not confuse scoring with how important you are to a team. Shake Milton scores 13 a game. Danny Green scores 9.5. Who's more important to this team? It's not close, right? It's not close. So just a great example right there. But this team, scoring-wise, it is one Joel Embiid. Tonight, the first option is Tobias Harris. Now, I would agree that Simmons needs to step up tonight and score more points. This is a night when I would say You've got to score more points, Ben Simmons. No question about that. Because this is the reason why. Without Joel Embiid, I think the kick out three, the open looks for three, will not be as prevalent. You will not get the same open looks without Joel Embiid. You don't have to, sag down on Embiid. You don't have to double Embiid. Without having to double him, you don't have, one of the things is if you watch these Sixers games a lot, you'll see Embiid get the ball, the double comes his way. Well, that double is leaving somebody, and boom, that's where the opening happens. So you got all of that now kind of out the window. All of that is kind of out the window when Joel Embiid goes out. So, yes, absolutely. You would certainly say you have to rely. This is one of the games. I don't say I need more scoring from Ben Simmons. I'm not one of the, but tonight, yes, now you need more from him. Because without Joel Embiid, the kick-out threes are not going to be as prevalent. You're not going to get those good looks like you get for Seth Curry and Danny Green. And if you do, you're getting them because Simmons is aggressive, and they're closing on him, and he's kicking out. 609-403-0973. All right, we got a lot of messages coming in over here as well. James says, Sixers in a blowout tonight, full capacity. That'll be the difference. Yeah, the crowd will be different. There'll be no question that having that crowd there makes this a different situation. There's no question that having the full house for the first time, that's going to change the dynamic for a whole heck of a lot of stuff. Tony, Mike, when do you think Embiid plays next? I don't really have an answer to that question. I mean, I can't speculate, but a meniscus tear, I know people who have had this and play with it. You can play through a small meniscus tear, but if they don't heal sometimes, it could turn into a problem. But you can play with it. It's like a pain tolerance type of thing. It's it's not like an ACL where you just can't do anything. I mean, you're out. You can't walk. Meniscus, you can play. It just how much pain tolerance. Mike, what's wrong with Embiid's knee? Was it a sprain? It's an MCL tear. Is what you're going on with there. So could be they're listing him as day to day, but when I hear day to day from the Sixers, that worries me, man. I would rather the Sixers just say he's out indefinitely and then say, "Oh, never mind, he's ready for game 2." The way they do things sometimes, and you look back at this and say, Tim from Millville, unreal. Everything was lining up perfectly for this team. Well, they had a great path, man. There's no question about that. All right, 609-403-0973. We are busy. We are packed. Obviously, the Embiid news huge here. And how about what happened in Boston? I was told that Boston was doing everything right. They had the best coach. Remember, the coach was great. He's the best coach in the world. How about the coach is now the president, and he doesn't think he's the best coach for the team, so he's no longer coaching? Is the coach really that important? If the best coach says, that's not all that important, I'm going to jump out of here. Coach K also is stepping down at Duke. This will be his last year at Duke. What a big day this has been. Great NBA games last night. Knicks and Hawks tonight. Sixers and Wizards tonight. We got it all. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. He's riding shotgun in the next segment here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. And don't forget, watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Just search 973 ESPN.
Right here on 97.3 ESPN with the voice of the 76ers, Tom McInnes, calling all the exciting play-by-play action.
In and out, no tap by 7-2.
It's Sixers Wizards.
All right, welcome back. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Over on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, as we will take a look at Joel Embiid is out tonight against the Wizards. How long is he out with that injury? Who knows? Day to day, they say. 7 foot, 280 pounds with a knee problem. I don't know if that's day to day. I don't know if they're just trying to put a positive spin on things, Mike. But when you hear meniscus, day to day, Sixers, Joel Embiid, I don't know if that's a positive feel for you. How about it?
No, those are not words you want to hear in the same sentence. And I remember, I did my playoff preview, about 10 days ago, and it was basically 5 questions that the Sixers had to answer if they were going to go and reach the NBA final or perhaps win a championship. And question number 1 was, is Joel Embiid going to be durable enough to withstand a deep playoff run? And we're 4 games in, and right now the answer is no. And as far as when we see him again, I take my attitude that I take with whenever a professional athlete is injured for any team. I don't really put a lot of stock in what the team says. I'll believe the athlete is playing again when I see him on the court. So I'll believe Joel Embiid is back when I see him on the court.
So without Joel Embiid, does this series get a little discomforting, or should they close this thing with or without Embiid tonight?
Absolutely not. I think the Sixers close out this series. No NBA team has ever come back from a 3-0 deficit. The Washington Wizards aren't going to be the first. Last I checked, Raul Neto is still on the Washington roster. As long as he's on the roster, the Sixers should be fine. They're going to figure out a way to win tonight. They played 21 games without Embiid. They went 10-11 in those 21 games. The Wizards are not a good team. I would expect the Sixers, especially with a day to prepare, right?
Yes.
A day to adjust to life without Embiid. I would expect the Sixers at home to close that series out tonight.
If you were picking right now, I mean, before you would say, all right, Embiid's the first guy that you would take. You would say Bradley Beal becomes the best player all of a sudden. Who's the next guy?
Boy, that's a tough question, because is it, with the way the first 3 games of the series went, you probably would have said Tobias Harris. But if you don't say Tobias Harris after game 4, then you're probably in a toss-up between Russell Westbrook and Ben Simmons, 2 guys that have a lot in common. Basically, Ben Simmons is a triple-double machine who won't shoot from the outside, and Russell Westbrook is a triple-double machine who can't shoot from the outside. So it's probably a toss-up there. But I think the 76ers just have too much depth overall, and the fact they're at home, they still have a problem with matching up against the Sixers' bigger players. I expect the Sixers to close out the series tonight. What happens in the future, however, now is certainly up for debate and is anybody's guess.
Yeah, now we'll get to that in a little bit. I know we all have eyes on that game here locally, but we also have eyes on that Hawks-Knicks series we'll get to. I want to definitely get your take, Mike, and I'm imagining I know where this might go, but I want to ask you anyway. How much was what happened the other night an issue for this Sixer team moving forward? When they lost that game the other night, did you say they lost that game because Ben Simmons went 50% from the line in the final, in those 3 trips?
Well, I think it was a contributing factor. You look at, for a professional sports team to blame a loss on one thing, it's difficult. Like a football team might lose a game 28-27, and the field goal kicker might miss a field goal that could give them the win. Did the field goal kicker lose the game by himself? No. Was he a big part of it? Yes. I think, unlike some people that kind of brush aside the Simmons missed 3 throws, I think they're important. I mean, in a close NBA game, he went 4 for 8 from the foul line in the final 3 minutes. They were definitely a major part, not only because of the misses, but also what it prevented the Sixers from doing, right? Instead of running a play, maybe exploiting a matchup that they saw out there, getting the other 4 guys involved, it was Ben Simmons shooting foul shots. So it was not only that he made 4 of 8, it was the fact that, him being fouled on purpose and sending him to the line, I think takes the entire team out of its rhythm. And he just did not make enough foul shots. I think there's a huge difference between being up 1 with the ball in the closing seconds of a game and being down 1 with the ball.
Well, that I agree with all that. And I would say, look, you got to make the free throws. There's no question in that spot. The difference is if he makes the free throws, instead of being down 2 at the 2-minute mark, they're up by 1. But realistically, It didn't cost them the game, but it could have changed some things. I agree with what you just said there. I'm kind of glad that we agree on that. The difference is I thought with 2 minutes left, because you can't foul him purposely after that, they didn't get enough stops. That's where I was disappointed. And I thought a bigger problem was I was really disappointed in Harris, who has been excellent this year. It was his time with Embiid out to have to step up, and I didn't think he did a good job of it.
Well, right. You look at Embiid getting hurt. You look at Tobias Harris going 8 for 24. You look at the defense maybe not being what it was in the first 3 games. But again, I come back to, 2 minutes to go, the Wizards up 1 rather than being down 2 or tied. I think that's a huge difference. I think it changes the way you manage the 24-second clock. It changes what you play. And also, I look at it as 3 possessions that the Sixers did not get a chance to. Maybe, who knows, maybe Tobias Harris exploits a matchup. Maybe Danny Green makes a 3. Maybe Seth Curry makes a play out of a pick and roll.
Yeah.
Those players did not get that opportunity because the other team is putting Simmons on the foul line. And I think that's just as important as to, the makes and misses of Ben Simmons.
You're absolutely right. But it goes like Doc tried to explain that, hey, 1 point per possession, we'll take that all the time. That comes into play if you're stopping the other team. The problem was you didn't get a stop on defense, because if the Sixers get a stop, you getting 1.3 times down the court, but you're right. In the end, it changed the flow of the game, but they still had 2 minutes to close that thing out, and they didn't get it done. That's what was disappointing, the whole situation. Now, do you think you'll see Washington use that strategy even more tonight? Will they start it at the 5-minute mark? Will they start it at the 4-minute mark?
I definitely think you're going to see it again, and I think it depends on how, what the score of the game is. They actually did it, I believe, the first time they did it was the second quarter, maybe the other night, and it's important for fans to remember, a lot of fans don't realize this. You can't do it within the last 2 minutes of not only the fourth quarter, but any quarter. If you foul a guy away from the ball, it's a free throw and the foul team retains possession. So 2 minutes to go in the first quarter, you just can't foul Ben Simmons inside of the 2 minute mark of any quarter. So it's important for people to remember that. But I definitely think you'll see it again. For all the reasons that we just outlined, and basically because it worked, right? They won the game, and they're going to look at it as it worked. So I think if they're down 10 in the third quarter with 5 minutes to go, why not?
Right. No, and that's what so do they start it a little earlier this time? Now, Doc Rivers was asked by Kevin Kincaid, hey, did you think about taking him out? He said, that's idiotic, essentially. I'm not taking him out. If that's your suggestion, I'll pass on that. Should he think about it?
Well, I disagreed. Obviously, Doc in the Monday night post-game presser was doing everything he could to protect Ben Simmons and praise his player and stand by his player, and I understand that. The one thing that Doc said I agree with is you can't take Ben Simmons out of the game. I think you're doing the Wizards a favor by taking him out of the game. So you have to play him. But this is like, Hyman Roth and The Godfather 2, right? This is the business we choose. This is the lineup the Sixers chose, right? All year long, they've told us Ben Simmons, Doc has said, I don't care if he doesn't shoot from the outside. I'm not worried about the foul shots. We scored 125 points. Who cares who scores? If Ben gets 0, he's still great. Okay. This is the player we've chosen. This is the lineup we've chosen. And if he doesn't make foul shots in key spots, you might lose, and you're going to have to live with that. But you can't take him out of the game. He does too many other things well. I'm in the Simmons doubter camp. You'd be doing, Scotty Brooks would be cartwheeling on the other sideline if Doc Rivers took Ben Simmons out of the game with 3 minutes to play.
Oh, man. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City looking at this game tonight. Let me ask you this then. If Embiid is out for a week, 2 weeks, are they good enough without Joel Embiid to beat Atlanta or New York?
You know what? I think they're good enough to beat the Knicks without Joel Embiid. The Atlanta Hawks, not the Atlanta Hawks I've seen play the last couple of days. I think the Hawks are a dangerous team. I think with Embiid, that was probably a series the Sixers would win in maybe 5 close games, or more likely I would have picked it to go 6. I think without Embiid, the Hawks are a problem. The Hawks have not only Trae Young, but they've got some length and John Collins, DeAndre Hunter. Clint Capella. They've got some rim protection there. Bogdanovich has added a lot. Nate McMillan is a good coach. I said they're 27-11. They finished the regular season with that. They're 3-1 so far in the playoffs. I think with Embiid, that was a 5-game series. That was where every game was, in doubt with 4 minutes to go. I probably would have picked Sixers in 6. Without Embiid, boy, I don't think the Sixers have enough to get past the Hawks.
Right. And I said that last night. I'm like, quite frankly, like this team was built around. I think what Brett Brown, one of the things that he didn't want to do was make it determinant on whose team this is. It's Joel's team or it's Ben's team. I think he wanted it to be both their teams. I think Doc has come in and said, Joel, this is your team. And with that, Ben, I'm not asking you to score, right? Don't worry about being a scorer. This is Joel's team. Now, you take that off the table, and the team becomes very discombobulated, where Brett kind of tried to play both sides. When Joel went out, the team looked a lot better sometimes without Joel because it suited Ben's style more. Do you think that will suit Ben without Joel this time around?
Well, past history says the way they played this season, the answer would be no. And one of the frustrations with Ben Simmons, and I think D. Lineman asked a great question on the Doc Rivers post-game press conference Monday, is the question about Simmons is not only the shooting, but the question is, okay, when Embiid goes out and we need you to step up, we can't have games where you score 8. We need you to get 25. We need you to get 30. And Simmons, for the most part, I think there was one game this year where Embiid was out, where he went off. But for the most part, you get the same Ben Simmons without Embiid that you get with Embiid. And that's a problem. And I don't think that's going to be good enough to, probably not get past the Atlanta Hawks if that's the case. And I think, even the most ardent Sixer fan would say, attacking the Brooklyn Nets or the Milwaukee Bucks without Joel Embiid would be a problem.
No question about that. Now, what do you think? That series is now set. I don't know when it starts. I think it's over the weekend is when they're going to get they start Saturday. Yeah, over the weekend. So they're starting that thing Saturday, 7:30. A lot of people think this is almost the finals, that these are the two best teams, Milwaukee and Brooklyn.
Well, I mean, I still think the Sixers are right there with a healthy Embiid, but without, if depending on Embiid's health, it might be viewed as, the Eastern Conference semifinal. A lot of buzz about the Milwaukee Bucks and, of course, their sweep of the Miami Heat. But, Mike, I just keep watching the Brooklyn Nets, and, I watched them in the fourth quarter last night, and my jaw drops open with what they're able to do on the offensive end of the floor. I mean, they score about 15 points in 30 seconds sometimes.
Yeah, they put the foot on the gas last night.
I think, right. I mean, in that fourth quarter, it went from being like 9 to 20 it seemed like 3 possessions basically. So, and I think the thing we're forgetting about is just how good Kevin Durant is. And I was thinking the other night, he's 7 foot tall and he's out drilling 30-footers from beyond the 3-point line. I mean, he's almost impossible to defend. I think we forget sometimes how good he is, and the fact that he might be, arguably, the best player in the world right now when he's completely healthy. So I still like the Brooklyn Nets. I think the Milwaukee Bucks are going to give them all they can handle with Giannis and Drew Holiday, but again, I just watch the Brooklyn Nets sometimes, and my mouth drops open to the floor with what they're able to do offensively.
Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. Check out his must-win column at the pressofAtlanticCity.com. Brad Stevens is going to be the new president of basketball operations. He is no longer the coach. I mean, this Celtics thing, it's interesting because the Sixers and Celtics were kind of on this parallel together. The Celtics had a lot of earlier success. Now it's kind of flipped. Stevens was this great coach. Now he's not coaching anymore. What a bizarre day in Boston.
Well, I'll disagree with you a little bit there. I think the Celtics are still way ahead of the Sixers. I mean, the Celtics have been in the playoffs 13 of the last 14 years. They won a title in 2008. They've been to the Eastern Conference Final 3 of the last 5 years. They swept the Sixers last August. So if the Sixers had maybe done something in this playoffs, which they still can do, maybe that would move them ahead of the Celtics. I just think it's a natural sort of break for the Celtics to make a management change, right? Obviously, they've got to take a step back a little bit. They have two great young players in Tatum and Jaylen Brown to build around. Danny Ainge is 62. He's been there 18 years. I think he had a heart attack in 2019. So it's probably maybe time for Ainge to sort of hand the reins over. And, Brad Stevens, I'm a big Brad Stevens guy. I know he's unproven as an NBA executive, but here's a guy who took Butler to two NCAA finals. I think is one of the top coaches in the NBA. So there's nothing in his basketball resume that suggests to me that he couldn't handle being president of the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, oh no, definitely. I'm not doubting that he could do that. It's essentially saying that and I mean, I guess it is that position's more important to winning than the coaches. Are you going to find a better coach than Brad Stevens? Are they finding a better coach than Brad Stevens?
I agree with you. I don't think he's going to find a coach that's, the equal of himself. But we've seen this with a lot of coaches, right? Kind of move into that front office. Bill Parcells comes to mind right away.
Yeah, but he kept coaching.
We'll throw your listeners back in time. Well, he stepped into the front office and then came back and stuff like that. We'll go back in time to Vince Lombardi with the Packers, right? He stepped away and then, resurfaced with the Redskins. So, and reading some of the stories out of Boston and the Boston Globe and stuff, it seemed like the past year and a half kind of really wore on Stevens or the last two seasons, especially coaching the bubble. And that's a story that I think is going to emerge more and more as we sort of come out of this pandemic on the other side, is the impact that kind of operating under the pandemic circumstances with all the testing and everything that it involved kind of took a toll on a lot of professional athletes and coaches.
Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. Follow him at AC Press McGarry, and he'll be back on Friday to recap the Sixers series, hopefully, or preview game number 6. Michael, appreciate it, man.
All right, we'll see you down the road, Mike. Thanks.
And he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. Great stuff from McGarry, as always. Paul Hudrick in the next hour. How will the Sixers replace Joel Embiid tonight? He'll give you how he would do it in 20 minutes.
A Town Square media station serving all of South Jersey. This is 97.3 ESPN, home of the Philadelphia Eagles.
He is hit! He stumbles! He's down!
WENJ HD Millville, Atlantic City. This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Now, live inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, here's Mike Gill.
All right, 3 o'clock hour here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Mike Gill with you until 6 o'clock tonight. Game night followed by Sixers and Wizards. Game 5, you can only hear it on 97.3 ESPN. Over in the stream, if you're watching the show live on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, got a lot of comments we want to get to. Adam says, why would Scott Brooks be so happy to have Ben Simmons out of the game? That was a good comment by Mike McGarry that Scott Brooks would be doing backflips down the sidelines if they took him out of the game. Because, I mean, quite frankly, defensively, he gives Washington a lot of problems. He also sets up the rest of the 76ers. Now, if they're going to foul him for 5 minutes on, keep this in mind. If you're going to keep fouling him, the fouls are starting to rack up for players. So you might put your guys into some foul trouble late in the game. So that's probably not a way they can go about it either. They might be able to do it for the 47 seconds they did the other night. Adam also says there's no way Embiid plays again this season with a torn meniscus. Well, we'll find out more about that. Jeremy from Trifecta Therapeutics is going to join us at 3:45 today to tell us a little bit more about this. I mean, look, the symptoms of a meniscus depend on the severity of the tear. If you have a minor tear, to me, that's still 2 to 3 weeks. Right? A 2 to 3, a small meniscus tear. It's a minor injury. A meniscus tear is a, quote, minor injury. It is. But they can become more if you don't deal with them right. The treatment of a meniscus tear can be resting, ice, an ice elevation. You're not having to go through surgery, but it's not like, hey, my knee feels okay overnight. I'm ready to go. I still think so. Where over on the StreamYard, Adam says there's no way Embiid plays again this season with a torn meniscus. I don't think there's no way. I don't know that you're going to see him for 2 weeks, though. And the problem becomes when Joel Embiid sits for 2 to 3 weeks. We've seen this story before. You're not getting the same version, man. You're not getting the guy that, running up and down the floor, active all over the place, doing everything. You're not getting that guy if he sits out for 2 to 3 weeks. That's where this becomes a problem. And if you can't have him at the level that he's playing right now, the level that he's playing when he went out, you need that level. If you're not getting that level, you ain't good enough. I'm sorry. This is all predicated, what was the process? In some people's mind, it was to win multiple championships. Fine. The process was about finding a player that puts you in position to be able to win multiple championships. They found that guy. But yes, Adam, you're right. Your best ability is your availability. And so far, Joel Embiid's problem has been first year in the playoffs. They win 52 games. He's not there. They beat the Heat in the first round. Well, then he's playing in the second round, and he's clearly not himself. Through no fault of his own. I mean, he got an orbital bone break in his face because of Markelle Fultz running into him. Next year, he's got the queasy stomach and the gastroenteritis and all sorts of wacky stuff that prevented him from playing and being the same player that we're seeing Now, the guy that we're seeing now is clearly better than any version that we had in 17, 18, 19. I wrote these numbers down. I keep looking down if you're watching the show. I was looking at the whole Boston thing. McGarry's wrong. I mean, he's not wrong, but he talked about the Celtics have had, he went back to 2008. Well, yeah, if you're going back to 2008, the Celtics have clearly been a better team. But if you look at the Embiid years, and I take that rookie season out because he only played a handful of games. If you look at the Embiid seasons, 1, 2, 3, 4 Embiid years, and you match those two teams up, Philly and Boston, Philly won, 52, 51, 43, and 49 for 195. So 195, and Boston has won 55, 49, 48, and 36. 188. So in the 4 full Embiid seasons, Philly has won more games. Boston has had more playoff success. There's no question. But the way I said it to him was Boston had the earlier success, and it seems like that's flipping a little bit. Well, he goes back to 2008 and that they made the playoffs 14 out of 13 times, which I don't even know that that's accurate. I'll have to look that up. But that being said, the Sixers went through the 19 wins, the 18 wins, the 10 wins. And keep in mind, they drafted Joel Embiid. They had 19 wins. They then drafted Joel Embiid. He did not play that year. He did not play the year after that. So they went through 2 very poor seasons based on the fact that the guy that they drafted, who has now taken them to this point, the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, was not available to them. So this whole thing was done to acquire this level of player because it's hard. People are talking about, well, you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to do this. Give me a team. All right. Right now, you look in the standings and tell me which teams can win a championship. You like Brooklyn. All right. Brooklyn has Kevin Durant. They have Kyrie Irving. They have James Harden. Those 3 players were drafted 1, 2, and 3. Why do you like the Nets? Well, they have those 3 guys. Where were they drafted? Kyrie 1, Durant 2, Harden 3. I'd like that team too. Right? Now, Milwaukee's a little different. You could say, well, Milwaukee didn't have to do that. And here they are, still without a title. Still haven't been to a finals. They got Giannis Antetokounmpo. Boom. They're the team that found the diamond in the rough. But look at the other teams in the playoff. The Knicks have been bad for 20 years. The Hawks. I just told you about the Hawks. They lost for 4 seasons. They ended up getting Trae Young and made the trade for Capella, and they got John Collins. Everybody has gone through their past discretions to get to where they are. The Utah Jazz. You got Donovan Mitchell. You got Rudy Gobert. They're one of the teams that kind of found it. So Boston reached the playoffs 7 straight years with Brad Stevens, 3 first-round exits, 3 Eastern Conference Finals, and 1 semifinals. So 7 straight years they have been in the playoffs. And right now the Sixers are on, what, a 4-year run? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, they've been in 4 straight years. So Stevens' crew got to the playoffs in 15 when the Sixers were bad, 16 when the Sixers were bad. So from 17, 18, and 20, they went to the final, the Eastern Conference Finals. No, I think Boston has accomplished more in the postseason. But my question was, one had the earlier success, Boston, and now that seems to have flipped, where Boston was the 8 seed or the 7 seed, and Philly was the 1 seed. They seemingly have flipped spots. The Sixers got rid of their coach last year. Boston is now going through a coaching change this season. It's an interesting situation. You look at the teams. Phoenix is another team. They have been bad. Phoenix has been bad for 10 years. They haven't been in the playoffs in 10 years. They got DeAndre Ayton. He was the number 1 pick. They got Booker. He was like the 8th pick. They kept stockpiling picks and picks and picks and picks. This is why people talk about, well, these teams didn't have to be bad they didn't have to be bad on purpose. They were just bad. People just act like being bad on purpose is automatically meaning, well, anybody can be bad on purpose, lose on purpose. No, you can't. Phoenix was bad for 10 years. New York's been bad for 20 years. Chicago's been bad since 2013 when the Sixers beat them. They haven't been good since. Orlando's been awful. Detroit's been terrible. You can keep being bad, but that doesn't mean you're going to turn out to be good. You got to make some right decisions. And that's the point. The Sixers made a lot of mistakes. All these teams make a lot of mistakes. That's why they keep being bad. Phoenix was bad for 10 years. They got Devin Booker. Even having Devin Booker, they weren't all that good. They got DeAndre Ayton. Even getting DeAndre Ayton, they weren't all that good. It wasn't until they got Chris Paul, and they finally got good. So just being bad doesn't mean you're going to turn out to be good all of a sudden. You've got to still manage the organization properly. That's where people, I think, have a distorted kind of view of what the Sixers did. Well, anybody can be bad. Anybody can do that. No, because these teams are bad perpetually. Sacramento, you're always bad. Minnesota, always bad. New Orleans, always bad. You don't just say, let's just be bad and then we'll get good. You still have to be managed properly. The Charlotte Hornets, always bad. Indiana Pacers, always mediocre. Washington Wizards, always bad. I mean, Washington has been bad forever. They got Bradley Beal. They had John Wall. He was the number 1 pick in the draft. Just getting those guys, you still have to build a team around the best player. You still have to build a team around the number 1 overall pick. And that's what the Sixers kind of struggled with when they had Embiid and Simmons. They kind of struggled with, okay, now what? They weren't picking players in the draft to build a team. They were picking players in the draft to find an MVP. That's the difference. People are like, well, they missed on all these players. That's because they said, look, we got Joel Embiid. He's out for 2 years. If Joel Embiid can't play, then let's go get Okafor because he's the best player at that spot. Now, Okafor turned out to be a bust. The league kind of changed right on the dime there. But they weren't drafting a team to say, hey, let me get a player to play with Joel Embiid. They were trying to find a player to be Joel Embiid. They were trying to find a player that turned out to be the best player on the best team. That's why they kept drafting the way that they did. Nerlens Noel, he was the consensus number 1 prospect. Well, he got hurt. So the other team said, we don't want to hurt guys. Sixers said, if he's the best player, we want him. Once they saw Michael Carter-Williams, well, he's not going to be that player that's special, so let's trade him off so that we can get another chance to try to find another special player. See, people kept thinking, well, they kept missing in the draft. They weren't drafting to put a team together. They were drafting to find an MVP player. And then once Embiid got on the floor, they got that MVP player. 609-403-0973. To McGarry's point, in the last 4 Embiid years, the Sixers lost to the Celtics twice in the playoffs. Yeah, absolutely. They did. The Celtics have beat the Sixers twice in the playoffs, and they swept them last year. Now, no Ben Simmons last year. By the way, with Ben Simmons, they were not beating the Celtics last year. Right? They were not beating the Celtics last year. Yeah, the Celtics have beaten. I said they've had more playoff success than the Sixers have. My point was, it feels like it's kind of taken a turn where the Sixers were below the Celtics, and now that it's flipped. So I'm not disputing that they had more previous success than the Sixers did. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. All right, so Joel Embiid is out. Now what? Who starts tonight? How do they play this? Paul Hudrick, inside the Sixers, coming up next on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. And the free mobile app, Sports Bash, brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan. The all-new Matt Blatt is now open, Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township, next to Home Depot, online, mattblattnissan.com. I'm Mike Gill, and this is the Sports Bash Live. You can watch the show. Go to 97.3 ESPN on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and just search 97.3 ESPN. You can watch us on your tablet, on your phone, on your smart TV. Back with Paul Hudrick coming up.
Home is where the heart is, and with a $268 million Powerball jackpot win, home could look a lot different than it does now. With all those millions, a Cape May mansion could be yours. So take a chance on Powerball. Anything can happen in Jersey.
Okay, my shipments have to get to customers on time and looking good.
It's possible with Staples Connect. Staples Connect has small business shipping covered with premium shipping supplies, custom labels, and UPS shipping services. And now, buy two, get one free on decorative shipping supplies. Plus, get 20% off UPS Express shipping services. Explore what's new at your local Staples store or staplesconnect.com. Staples Connect, the working and learning store. N73, visit staplesconnect.com/shipping for details.
So in life throws you uh-ohs, just say, better get Mako.
And head to Mako.com for an online estimate.
Okay, 3 dozen by tomorrow morning. Yeah, the roses and
Faraz's flower shop is blooming. To keep up with high demand, he must strengthen his business's roots.
Just 1 second. Faraz's flowers. Hold, please. Hi, how are you doing? Welcome to Faraz's.
Indeed can help him hire the people he needs.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. When you sponsor a job, you immediately get your short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job criteria. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
Get in the zone, AutoZone.
Welcome to AutoZone. What are you working on today? Of course, we can help you find the right oil for your next change. We've got what your car's engine needs. Right now, you can get 5 quarts of Pennzoil high mileage motor oil and an STP oil filter for just $28.99. And you can get it all fast your way. Just order online with our free same-day store pickup or next-day delivery. Getting your job done just got easier. Restrictions apply.
Get in the zone, AutoZone.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit beefy, or even with type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term insurance may only cost you about $200 a month. Affordable term life insurance is out there. Call Term Provider and speak with Big Lou at 800-481-1458. 800-481-1458 or visit biglou.com. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He's on meds too.
O'Reilly.
Get more miles on the road with O'Reilly Auto Parts. A clean fuel system means better gas mileage for your car. Right now at O'Reilly Auto Parts, get 2 bottles of Lucas Fuel Injector Cleaner for $8. Plus, earn double O Rewards points. For a clean, lubricated, more fuel-efficient system, stop by O'Reilly Auto Parts today or visit O'ReillyAuto.com.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
You can watch the Sports Bash live now on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Search 97.3 ESPN or visit our website, 97.3.
All right, here we go. It's the Sixers and the Wizards tonight. We now know there will be no Joel Embiid tonight, but for how long? That remains to be seen. Paul Hudrick covers the 76ers. He has for a long time. 97.3 ESPN.com, at Paul Hudrick on Twitter. So the news came out today, Paul, that Joel Embiid will now be out. He was listed as doubtful yesterday, which I guess made you feel like, okay, Chris Paul was doubtful and he ended up playing, and some things, changed from day to day. But he is out. We now know the injury. Are we optimistic that we see Joel Embiid anytime soon when you see day to day with the meniscus tear?
Day to day can mean kind of anything, I guess, is what you could say. I don't want to speak in anything that's as far as, and I think anyone that's speaking in like absolutes regarding this is just speaking out of turn. It's when you're talking about a meniscus tear, it depends on a lot of things. It's going to depend on how big the tear is, where the tear is. And then also we're not even 48 hours out from the injury itself. So they still might not even have gotten like the best look at it to know exactly how bad or the severity of it. So I just think there's a lot of questions still, but I would say I am optimistic that he will play at some point. When, I don't know, but I do think that I do think the team, I believe it when they say it's going to be rehab. And they're going to have to strengthen the area kind of around that meniscus. And that's how they're going to have to, manage the injury. And it's going to be a lot to do with his pain tolerance as well. So, there's a lot of factors. I would say I am optimistic that he will play again in this postseason. How effective he'll be and, how many minutes he'll be able to play and all that, I don't know. I don't think anyone does.
And that's the problem. If you don't get the bench, the Joel Embiid that we've been getting for the first 3 games in 11 minutes of this series, we've seen this play before. I've already watched this act, a welding mask, gastroenteritis. If you're not getting Joel Embiid at his best, that's it, right?
Yeah, to an extent, I will say that he is a smarter basketball player than he's been. And I think he's a more determined player than he's ever been. So I think from that regard, I think he can overcome it to an extent. Of course, he's, the explosiveness, the dunk that we saw in game 3, like I wouldn't anticipate a moment like that happening for the rest of the playoffs. But he has really, this year at least, he has become an elite mid-range player. And so I think that is going to aid him in a big way. I think the fact that he has become a better passer, that he's become better at dissecting.
You could make the argument that if the other team knows that his whole game is mid-range and he doesn't have that, he has that elongated, ball fake where teams, and then he goes past. If they know that he doesn't have that in him, is he as effective as a player?
Well, no, probably not. But that's not to say he still can't be pretty darn effective. Even just by him being out there, and even if he just plays in the post almost exclusively.
I'll take a 70% Embiid over the alternative. There's no question. I guess the thought is, if you don't have Embiid at his best, do you have a shot to beat Milwaukee and Brooklyn?
Not as good of one. I don't know. For me, I have to see how he looks before I feel comfortable saying that. As we sit here today, it diminishes your chances, certainly, because he was arguably the MVP of the league, and he is not going to be 100% for the rest of this playoff. So, or at least likely not to be 100%. I don't know the full extent, but it certainly diminishes their chances of being able to beat one of those teams, but you never know. Maybe he comes into this Hawks series, he plays, and maybe he's not the same guy, but he's still pretty darn effective, and the other guys step up around them. We'll see.
Are they?
I don't know.
If people just said, "Oh, they had this great path, they beat Washington," they'll probably, tough series against the Hawks, but is it a tough series? If Joel Embiid, let's say he misses 2 weeks, and they start that series without him, can they beat the Hawks a couple games without him?
They might be able to steal a game, especially at home. That's why you fought for home court advantage. That's why, you got the 1 seed was for, not necessarily for this exact moment, but for moments like this where maybe things weren't going your way otherwise. At least you have that home court advantage. So, yeah, I mean, I think, is it possible that they could beat a Hawks team a game or two without Joel Embiid? Yeah, I think they could do it. Them winning an entire series without Joel Embiid, that I don't see. But if he misses a game or two, could they steal one of those 2 games and perhaps win the rest of the series? Yeah, I think that's very possible. And again, it's still going to depend on how he looks and how the other guys step up, because that's going to matter too.
At Paul Hudrick on Twitter. What do they do in the short term, I guess, tonight without him? Who starts? How's this kind of break down? Because last game they went with Mike Scott for 17 minutes. Do you see Scott go into that role? Does Howard get the start and play more minutes? Do they do 3 guards? Give me some options here, pal.
I think the only wrong answer is to start Mike Scott or Dwight Howard. Ben Simmons should start at the 5 tonight. To me, there's like no question about it. Is Doc Rivers going to do that? I don't know. But to me, I'm starting Ben Simmons at the 5, and I think either of these 3 options are good, Mike. I would love to see Tyrese Maxey get a shot. I think that would give them a lot of energy off the bat. I think the crowd would be really juiced up by seeing him out there. He's clearly a fan favorite. Just the energy he brings against that small lineup with Ben Simmons at the 5, use him and Ben in the pick and roll. I would like to see that personally. And then as the hierarchy goes, Matisse Thybulle, I don't think Matisse Thybulle will be a bad option either, because if you play Ben Simmons at the 5, someone's got to guard Bradley Beal. So Matisse Thybulle, you slot him in pretty nicely there. He takes over guarding Bradley Beal. You move on from there. And then your third option to me would be George Hill. George Hill is kind of, 1, he's the most veteran of those guys. 2, he's the best shooter of those 3. And then the last thing is he can play defense too. So it's not, not to the level of Thybulle, but he's a solid defender. He can kind of just give you an all-around floor game, which would be, very good with Ben Simmons at the 5. To me, it's just the only mistake Doc can make would be to start Mike Scott or Dwight Howard. And I got to be honest with you, Mike, I think he's going to do that. I really think if I had to guess, I would bet that he's going to start Mike Scott and that Ben and kind of play it that way. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I think you saw in this really all season long, you saw that Mike Scott's not having a good year. He's not been effective in this series. Dwight Howard has not been effective. He's really getting in a lot of, they're not letting him play at all. So his game is almost ineffective. So with this small team that they're up against, I'll just keep saying it. I would start Ben Simmons at the 5. I think to me, that's a no-brainer.
All right. Well, and I probably would agree with you, but I'll just ask this then. Playing Ben Simmons at the 5, doesn't that negate some of what makes Ben? A little defense. Like if you are you saying that you need to, because who's going to play, let's say, Gafford in the post, or who's going to play when Lopez comes in? I mean, is Ben Simmons going to defend Lopez now?
Well, my guess would be that. So I think with Gafford, I think he'll be fine, because that's not Gafford's game. Gafford's not a guy who's going to post you up and back you down and muscle you in. That's not his game. His game is to set screens and catch lobs, which actually Ben Simmons is pretty well, pretty capable of doing. I think he'll actually be I actually think he's a better option against Gafford than Dwight Howard as far as defending him.
But he's a better option against all those guys. But the problem is they don't have a better option against Beal.
No, I mean, but again, if you Matisse Thybulle, then if that's your concern, then you start Matisse Thybulle, and Matisse Thybulle will do, he won't do as good of a job with Ben Simmons, but he'll do a pretty darn good job. He'll do a better job than most guys would do against Bradley Beal in the league. So I think you'd be okay there. And I think offensively, I love the idea of maybe using Ben more as a screener and a roller, especially if you're going with a smaller lineup with a lot of guards that can handle the basketball. And then 2, you could do the idea of something that I think a lot of people would like to see, and that is Ben Simmons with the ball and 4 shooters surrounding him. And you let Ben go to kind of town and dissect the defense like that. I think that's a viable option too.
Well, we've seen that in the 2017-18 playoffs.
Correct.
That's what they did without Joel. Do they have the same roster to do it? I guess so. You can go Harris and Green and Curry and pick another guy, I guess. And
George Hill.
Yeah, kind of go that route. I said earlier that Brett Brown, I feel like, didn't want to say this is your team or your team. I think he wanted to toe the line, and it was both their teams. I think Doc has said, Joel, this is your team. Ben, we're not going to ask you to score all that much. Just do your thing. Now, don't you have to say, Ben, I know I haven't asked you to score a lot, but I'm going to need you tonight.
I don't know if that's the thought. I look at it like this because I hear what you're saying, and I do think that it is important that Ben Simmons look to score more. I do think that's important, so I want to get that out of the way first. My concern would be, and I think you saw it last game when Joel Embiid was out, you saw what I thought Tobias Harris, when Joel Embiid went out, Tobias Harris thought to himself, all right, I got to go. I got to be the guy. And I thought that messed him up. I thought he got out of his game. I thought he did things that he normally doesn't do. He forced stuff. And I think that was as much of his issue as anything that last game. So if I'm Doc Rivers, I think in Ben Simmons' mind, he already knows he has to. And he even admitted that last game. He said that he thought he was perhaps a little passive after Joel Embiid left the game. So I think it's already on Ben Simmons' mind that he knows he has to step up more. So if I'm Doc Rivers, I probably don't want to put more pressure on him and make him think he's got to do everything himself. He already knows. He knows the pressure that he's under. He knows that Joel is out, and he knows what he has to do. So if I'm a Doc, I probably wouldn't go there. And I think, look, there are games where we've seen Ben Simmons do that. I mean, the most glaring one is the game in Utah where he scores, a career high, and he really, for the most part, took that game over. They lost that game ultimately, but the Washington Wizards are not the Utah Jazz.
That is true. Let me ask you this. With Joel Embiid off the floor, you can make an argument that Bradley Beal is now the best player on the floor, correct?
Yeah. I mean, well, it's from an offensive standpoint, yes. He is the best offensive player on the floor easily.
Who's number two?
Offensively? I mean, probably Tobias Harris. If we're talking, Tobias Harris or Ben, either one, depends on what you're looking at. As far as a scorer, it's clearly Tobias. Yeah. As far as just an overall, I would say as far as an overall basketball player, it's clearly Ben Simmons.
Drafting the rest of these players and Beal's out, you're saying, all right, I'll take Beal first. Who you take?
And then Simmons. Yeah, I would go Beal, then Simmons, and Harris. That would be.
Without Embiid, these two teams become a lot closer, do they not?
Well, sure. I mean, any team that loses its best player, if the Wizards lost Beal, they would crush them.
Terrible.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. But I think, and I just think the Sixers are deeper and better. I mean, this, with all due respect, the Wizards have been starting Raul Neto. I mean, and I don't mind Neto. I thought he was fine here, but Neto was like the 10th guy here last year. Like this is what we're talking about. That guy's in the starting lineup for this team.
I feel they win tonight. I feel they win tonight, and everyone's in a panic, and Ben Simmons is this and that. They win tonight, I think, and end this thing. To me, though, there's legit concern that he's not ready to play within 2 weeks here, and that Hawks team is pretty good. And I mean, even with like Capella, it's a different series. They got a guy that can legit defend you. I don't know if these are going to stop you, but you're not scoring 38 against the guy every single night in your sleep.
No, listen, and this is just the reality of the playoffs. I mean, it's just, the deeper you get, the harder it gets. So this Atlanta team is good. I mean, there's a reason why they're up 3-1 right now. They have Trae Young, who's one of the most dangerous offensive players in the entire league. You talked about Capella, who is a really good rim protector. Really, I'm actually, if I'm worried about something with Joel Embiid going up against Capella, it's actually defensively, because that's the one thing if we've seen throughout with Embiid, if he has trouble with something, it's those pick and roll, those rollers that are lob threats. Those are the guys that he typically has trouble with. So with the banged up knee, that's not going to help his cause. So that I'm concerned about that. And I think defensively in general, it's a tougher matchup. Tobias Harris is probably going to have to go up against DeAndre Hunter, who, with all due respect to Rui Hachimura, DeAndre Hunter's a lot tougher defensively than Rui. So that's going to be a tougher matchup. Ben Simmons is probably going to have a tougher matchup. John Collins is not that great of a defensive player, so someone's going to be able to, I think you could attack him, whether it's Tobias or Ben is going to be able to attack him. But yeah, it's no question the Hawks are a better and deeper team, and they have veteran proven players. When you're talking about, Bogdanovich has been around, even overseas. He played some big games. Gallinari, you already said Capella, Lou Williams. I mean, they have a good veteran. It's a much deeper and much better roster than this Wizards one. It's no doubt going to be, even with Joel Embiid, a much tougher matchup.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And, look, the Sixers are a team. It's you mentioned, I kind of like it almost, hey, you take LeBron off the Lakers, you take Giannis off the Bucks, you take that level of player off a team. What do you think that team's chances are going to be? I'm just trying to be real here. I get it. Hey, they got Ben Simmons, they got Tobias Harris. You should be good. No, all these teams have good players, but when you lose a player, I was explaining, like, they lost for a couple of years purposefully, yada, yada, not to build a team, Paul, to find that player. They weren't drafting guys to, hey, let's put this guy and he fits with him pretty good. They were drafting to find the best player in the league. That's what they ended up getting with Joel Embiid. The rest of the guys now, okay, they're the other pieces. But when you lose that best player in the league, the reality sets in that your season is probably not going to be where you hoped it was going to be. And I think if he's out for 2 weeks, I think we have to realize that this might not be their year because of that. And that goes back to, you have a 7-foot guy who's had some injury issues, and that's the chance you took when you put your eggs in the Embiid basket.
Yeah, and they really had, they had no choice but to do that because of how immensely talented he is and because of everything they did to get him to this point. So, but I mean, like you said, you look up and down, the team, like the Lakers didn't look too good with Anthony Davis last night. The Nets even look when, James Harden missed a bunch of games, or when Kevin Durant missed a bunch of, like, they've had, even though they have that star power, you take a guy of that caliber off your team, you're going to suffer. There's no two ways about it. And yeah, like, as much as do I think they have, so let's say, Mike, like, theoretically, Embiid's out for 2 weeks. So we'll include this week and next week. That means he's missing at least 2 games in the Atlanta series. Yes. Could they win one of those games? Absolutely. But they could definitely lose both of those games without Joel Embiid, at home or not. So you're right. That's the reality that people have to face, is that when, again, like, look at it from Atlanta's standpoint, you take Trae Young off that team, they're almost the Wizards. Like, they're just not that good. You take a guy like that out of the mix and it just completely changes. And on top of that, Mike, like, with Joel Embiid, everything revolves around him. Just like everything revolves around, Bradley Beal, everything revolves around Trae Young. That's just the way it goes. So when you take that out of the lineup, everyone has to adjust and everything changes. So yeah, I mean, if he's out 2 weeks and he can't play like the first couple of games of Atlanta, yeah, they're going to be in trouble.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Best case scenario, I guess, Paul, would be that Atlanta, New York goes 7. That would be on Sunday. And then that series wraps up and you probably start Tuesday or Wednesday night. And quite frankly, I don't know that he's ready to go Tuesday or Wednesday night. Give me a quick thought on what happened in Boston today.
I don't know, man. It's weird. I mean, the Danny Ainge thing, if I'm being honest, like, Danny Ainge has had obviously a lot of success. He's done a lot of good things with the Celtics. I thought he had a terrible offseason. Granted, they had injuries and everything and all that piled up, but you didn't have a big man and you signed Tristan Thompson, and you gave him, pretty good money. I just, you lost Gordon Hayward and you didn't really replace him. I don't know. I kind of saw this coming because I just didn't think. I thought Ainge
Stevens to that role. Like, okay,
right?
Because Stevens has had this reputation that he's this great coach, and the Sixers Celtics thing is, well, they got him, and they keep beating you because you keep getting out coach. Which, okay, are you now saying that the executive role is now more important than the on-court coach? Is that what they're saying here?
It's so bizarre to me because it said, like, the reports are he got burnt out on coaching. So then the move is to become a general manager and run an entire franchise. Like, I don't know how that's any less stressful or how that doesn't burn you out even more. There are other reports that perhaps he lost the locker room. So now you're going to be the general manager of a team who you lost in the locker room. Like, it's just a bizarre thing. And then the other thing too, Mike, like, I don't doubt that, like, Brad Stevens is a really smart dude. And I don't doubt that at some point he might be able to figure this out, but to just give him the job, not interview anybody, Like, think of all the good. Like, you could have. I know one day that was sort of like talk to the Oklahoma City and try to pram away Sam Presti.
Yeah.
How
long does it take before he hires a coach who's not as good as he, and he puts himself back in the coaching role?
Just Pat Riley's it up. You never know. That might happen. Absolutely.
At Paul Hudrick tonight, he will be at the Wells Fargo Center for a full sellout crowd. Sixers-Wizards Game 5, and you can hear the game right here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Paul, we'll talk to you, pal.
Sounds good, Mike. Take care, man.
All right, and he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Good stuff from Paul, as always. Get all of his Sixers coverage at 97.3ESPN.com, post-game, pre-game, and all of the updates. All right, when we come back, we told you the injury. Now we'll talk to Jeremy from Trifecta Therapeutics to tell us what can we really expect. What's the realistic possibility for a Joel Embiid return to the court? That's coming up next. Don't go away. The Sports Bash is live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And don't forget, you can watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Just search 973 ESPN. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And don't forget, you can watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Just search 973 ESPN. So Joel Embiid, the news came down today. He is out tonight. He has a meniscus tear in his right knee. It is a minor lateral meniscus tear. He took that awkward fall in Game 4. The Sixers said the injury will not require surgery, but physical therapy and treatment. Well, Dr. Jeremy Boyd from Trifecta Therapeutics in Glassboro, that is what he specializes in. We're going to have him join us to tell us a little bit more about what this means for Joel Embiid. The Sixers are saying they are not treating this with surgery, but it's going to be physical therapy and a treatment program. So what kind of treatment program and what is the message there? Adrian Wojnarowski reported that that managing potential swelling and pain in the knee will play a significant part in how soon Embiid will be able to return to the floor. So with all of that, Embiid is not playing tonight. And obviously, that is a big problem for this team. I think they'll win the game tonight. But when can they expect him to come back is the biggest question we got here. 609-403-0973 on the text board. And, of course, if you're watching the show live, you can hit us up on the video stream. And don't forget, coming up at 4 o'clock, it is Football at 4. Jeff Mosher set to join us, of course. There's some news on Dallas Goedert, by the way, you're going to want to stick around for. So this Embiid stuff, we're trying to connect with Dr. Jeremy Boyd from Trifecta Therapeutics, who is a board-certified orthopedic and sports physical therapist. He is, this is what he specializes in. And when you hear the Sixers are not going to treat this with surgery, but with a physical therapy treatment program, all of that stuff, you take a look at this and say, okay, how long is he going to be out? It's a minor lateral meniscus tear in his knee. And, I will say this. Unfortunately, I don't know that we see him for at least 2 weeks. That's just me. I don't know that we see Joel Embiid play at least for 2 weeks. I like this. Robert on our Facebook page says, I Googled meniscus tears, and I've read websites that say they can take 6 to 8 weeks to recover without surgery. This is like the old, I'm not a doctor, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express. I'm not a doctor, but I Googled meniscus tears. Now, there is various degrees. I agree. 6 to 8 weeks without surgery. Is it a minor tear? Is it a mediocre tear? All of that stuff. The big problem with this whole thing that the detractors, and this is fair, by the way, as I just said with Paul, this is what happens when you put your eggs in the Joel Embiid basket. A 7-foot guy who's prone to injury is you can't count on him. That's a problem, is that you cannot count on him. And all of that stuff comes into play in this kind of scenario, is that, hey, you know what happens is we need Joel Embiid. He is not ready to go, and that's the problem. And this team cannot win an NBA championship without him, period, point blank. It's not happening. So we can get all of that off the table. We can forget about, hey, we were excited about a possible run to the Eastern Conference Finals and possibly get to the NBA Finals, wide open this year, all of that stuff. You don't have Joel Embiid, it's not happening. Now, on the flip side, the other answer would be, okay, you have the number one pick, Ben Simmons. Can Ben Simmons carry this team? Can he? And look, Ben Simmons isn't going to carry the team. He's not going to score 40 points. He's not going to score 36 points like Joel Embiid does. But as Paul Hudrick just explained, will you see a situation like you did in that Miami series a couple of years ago? 2016, the playoffs, Miami, 2016-27 playoffs, you had no Joel Embiid, and you won the first couple games of that series. I think Embiid came back. Let me try to see in that playoff series. You go back to that series, that 2018 series between Philly and Miami. The first game, they won that game 130-103. Redick had a big game because if you remember that, man, I'm going back to that series, bringing back some memories here. And in that game, let's see what Simmons did in that game. You went back to, let's see here. In that game, why isn't this giving that to me here? Game 2, if you remember, they lost. They won the first game, 130-103, and then they made a bunch of all right, so in that first game, you had Ben Simmons went 5 of 13. The interesting part in that game, he went 7 of 10 from the free throw line. So he had 17 points and 14 assists. That was the number. The 14 assists is really the big one. Redick had 28 points. He had 4 threes. Dario Saric had 4 threes. Covington had 2 threes. Bellinelli had 4 threes. Ilyasova had 3 threes. That is right there. That's what we're talking about. That's where, okay, I don't need Simmons to really do a whole heck of a lot scoring-wise. I know he had 17 points, 14 assists, but if you're dishing out 3-pointers left and right, boom. The next game, they lost, and Simmons scored 24 points, but he only had 8 assists in that game. The threes weren't falling. Saric, 3 of 10. Redick, 1 for 7. Bellinelli, 2 for 8. Covington, 1 for 9. Go to the next game. A game that the Sixers won 128-108. Joel Embiid returned in that game. But Simmons still had 19 points, 7 assists. I mean, so Simmons did have some aggressive, better games. He got to the line. He was 7 of 8 from the free throw line in that game against the Miami Heat. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. All right, we'll try to catch up with Dr. Jeremy Boyd coming up in the next hour here because I definitely want to hear what he has to say about that. A little mix up with the schedule and the phone situation there. So we will try to get him on a little bit later on in the show. Maybe we'll do something with him in about an hour from now because this is right up his alley. And I definitely want to hear what he has to say about that. But when we come back, it's football at 4 on the other side. The Eagles working on a contract extension with one Dallas Goedert. What's the message there? The Julio Jones trade market. We'll get into that. Zach Ertz and ESPN. If you go to our website, 973ESPN.com, ESPN ranked the biggest position upgrades in the NFL this season. Like this guy replacing that guy. One of them had an Eagle in it. Check it out right now at 973ESPN.com. We'll discuss it with Mosher coming up. Is it an underrated signing that we're not giving enough credit to? All that, football at 4 next. All right, Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it's brought to you this hour by Prop Swap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet, take your profit. Find out how at PropSwap.com or download the Prop Swap app today. All right, a lot to dive into on this Football at 4 Wednesday edition. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. I don't see Geoff Mosher. I just kind of see an outline of Geoff Mosher. You appear to be just an outline of yourself. What's going on, man?
That is some terrible lighting right there. I tell you, I had to move to a different room, and I thought sitting in front of the window was going to be helpful for lighting, but that's pretty bad, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't
adjust that. How about let me see what I can do here. I mean, for the people listening, they're like, "Who cares? I can barely see you." But for the people watching, I look like what are the old
like I can't see you at all.
What's that?
The people listening say, I can't see you at all.
Yeah, seriously. It's like the old Alfred Hitchcock trailer there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, go ahead and ask away, and I'll figure out something.
All right. Well, don't kill yourself over there. All right. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is with us here on the Sports Bash Football at 4. All right. So a couple of things that we want to get into here. The whole Zach Ertz thing, I think. Do you think that the Ertz story will be written by the end of the week here?
It's very possible. It doesn't have to be, but I think it could possibly be written by the end of the week. I did speak to one team that had interest at one point in Zach Ertz and asked if there was any movement because it was after June 1st, and the answer I got was not much. So that tells you right there that things are still not exactly progressing quickly, at least as far as I asked. But I still don't think Mikey's going to be on the team when the season starts. I know Howie Roseman has said that he's a good player, that they're better off with Zach Ertz if they need to be, but you cannot, I believe, in my opinion, this is a very important year for Dallas Goedert. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. 4th year. He is tight end 1. You have to find out if he's going to be healthy, and he's also already talking about contract extensions. You can't have both these guys on the team and put the coaches in the position where they have to almost take a good player and put him on the bench because they want to play a different type of personnel. That's just ugly and not necessary. Kind of went through that a little bit last year with having Alshon on the team, even though the team didn't want him there. So I cannot imagine that he's really going to be on this team.
You mentioned that you said they wouldn't budge. You're talking about the Eagles wouldn't budge. They wouldn't budge off what they're asking for?
No. It's just that I think it's more Zach's salary that teams are going to want to, either renegotiate, restructure, maybe ask him to take a pay cut because they don't think he's, worth what his contract says it is worth. And so in that regard, Zach has to be, I would think, amenable to it. And I'm not sure that he is right now.
Today, Dallas Goedert on a Zoom call said that the contract, he's had contract extension talks with the Eagles, and that, that's interesting because he says he'd love to stay in Philadelphia and get the extension done, but he's also 1 year away from free agency. So is he kind of weighing the options here?
Imagine having Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz in 2019 and having neither of them in 2000. Oh, no, this is 2020 and then neither in 2022, right? That's how fast things can change in the NFL. But I suspect that the Eagles will get something done with Dallas Goedert because, again, they're going to move forward with him. He has shown when healthy that he is a very good tight end and could possibly be a top 5 tight end in the league. He has those type of abilities. He catches the ball very well. He has explosion after the catch. Really, the only thing he hasn't shown is durability, the ability to play 16 games and be productive in every single game. He's had a lot of injuries along the way. So obviously that's a big question mark. And you notice that the Eagles have stockpiled a lot of kind of what I would call project-like tight ends. I mean, the kid from Buffalo, Tyree Jackson, who was a quarterback, is going to attempt to transition to tight end. They brought in last year Jason Kroom. They brought in Hakeem. His last name escapes me. Butler, is it? What is it?
Yes. Butler.
Yeah, Butler. Right. So the kid that they signed, Mike, out of Nebraska, Jake Stoll, is definitely a name to watch. If you remember last year, they signed a rookie free agent. His name was Noah Togiai, and they really liked him. And they tried to, we talked about this. They tried to pass him through waivers so they can put him on the practice squad, and they were just blindsided, right, when the Colts picked him up. So I'm guessing they won't make that same mistake this year around if Jack Stoll continues to be one of those guys that they really think can be an NFL tight end and a good developmental tight end.
Well, I was going to say, we touched on this with Andrew a little bit yesterday, but because of, Ertz looking like he won't be here, and then you're working on a contract extension with Goddard, you don't have, for this year, that depth chart looks pretty unsettled. It almost appears like Darius Slay and the other cornerback. You got Goddard, and if Ertz isn't here, what do you got?
Yeah, my favorite guy is still out there, and that's Richard Rodgers. I thought, sort of tongue-in-cheek, he was their most productive tight end last year, only because Carson seemed to only be able to throw completed passes to him and him only. You remember that Giants game where he basically caught half of Carson Wentz's completions. So he's a guy who fits the offense well. Well, I assume fits Nick Sirianni's offense well, can block, can catch, is a good veteran number 2. He's still out there. Isn't Trey Burton, as we speak right now, still out there?
Believe so.
Yeah, and he's got experience. So, I mean, the Eagles don't have to panic here. I know they didn't draft a kid, but you usually keep 3. Goddard will be 1. Stoll will have a chance to be the number 3 guy as a developmental rookie free agent, and then your backup may just not be here, or it may be a guy like Kroom or someone else who has a good camp.
Geoff, yesterday was June 1st, and that is a big day in the NFL. How did it affect the Eagles with some of the things that they now will do moving forward?
It's just cleared up a little more cap space because of the contracts with Malik Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey. Some of the money that they would have had to absorb this year now goes into next year. So it goes against next year's cap, which isn't an ideal thing, but it is now because the Eagles need cap space. They need to be able to pay rookies. They need to be able to potentially afford a number 2 cornerback like a Steven Nelson or anybody else who might be out there. And of course, if they still want to make any trade, and we know Julio Jones is named out there, and then there is a degree of interest in him from the Eagles, obviously need some space there. So they need to have flexibility.
All right. Well, you just mentioned the Julio Jones thing. I want to ask you something about that. There are betting odds on this. Typically, the Eagles' odds are always going to be good. I feel like betting places know that Eagle fans are suckers. But are you surprised that the Eagles are high on that list? I mean, right now, the favorite is Seattle, then Tennessee. Philadelphia's third. I mean, it's plus 225 Seattle, plus 250 Tennessee, plus 275 Philadelphia.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised only because of what you mentioned about how Vegas views, fan bases, interest, media reports fuel into it, and certainly the Eagles have been linked to Julio Jones. I don't know that it makes the most sense. I mean, of course, it makes the Eagles better. I think there's no question about it. Gives them a lot of flexibility now with, if you had Julio Jones and where you're going to put Devontae Smith, you'll probably hit mix and match Devontae and Jalen Reagor at the Y and the Z a lot. And, Dallas Goedert will be a flex guy a lot. So you'll have some pretty good weaponry there along with Miles Sanders. And it really would cast into doubt some of the wide receivers that we talked about last year and whether they're going to be on the team, like a Hightower or a Watkins, things like that. It makes the team better because it makes any team better to have Julio Jones. It's not necessarily their biggest need.
Mosher, if they went after Julio Jones, does that tell you that their mindset is we're good enough to, I don't want to say win the Super Bowl, but hey, we got Julio Jones. We're good enough to win this division.
Yeah, I think that's what they do anyway. Most cases, right? Yes, there have been some times, like in the last few years, where Howie said he's made certain moves because he felt the window was still open after winning the Super Bowl to win another. Right now, I feel like Howie is just simply trying to field the most competitive team possible while still turning the roster over. And you can do that. You can bring in Julio Jones and look at your wide receiver group and say, I'm still got the future here in Devontae Smith, in Jalen Reagor, in maybe a Watkins or a Hightower or Greg Ward or somebody else who I've drafted and developed. So it doesn't preclude him. People talk about taking snaps away. You're still going to get those guys on the field a lot, Reagor and Smith. I don't think it hurts, but you can't be in the camp of saying, I want Jalen Hurts to succeed and I want to see what he can do this year, and then not be in the camp of, but he doesn't need a Julio Jones. You want him to have a great offensive line. You want him to have great weapons because the best chance he has to succeed is to have that.
Yeah. And that's why, okay. So I heard today, there was reports, that they don't think that they're looking. No one is willing to give up a first-round pick in the next draft coming up, but maybe a future first. But the best offer they've been kind of getting right now is like a third. I mean, I'd probably do it for a third, but are you giving up a first-round pick for Jones?
Not unless I absolutely have to. And then if I have to, you're asking me if I would do it. No, I don't know what the Eagles would do. But
is it important enough to you, Moshe, to get a guy like Jones around Devonta Smith and Jalen Reagor and Hurts?
Yeah, I think, but at the end of the day, it's still also about value. Yes, you consider that when you're making the trade about the benefits that it will have for your team. Adam Kaplan brought this up on our last podcast. I think it was a really fair assessment that you give up a first, but not a clean first. In other words, you might get Julio in a third back or Julio in a fourth or make something conditional so that you're not just totally giving up a first round pick. You're getting something in return. That to me seems likeliest to happen. Is that, you might give up a first, but Atlanta's not just getting that. They're going to have to give up something along with Julio because obviously you're taking that contract too.
Yeah, I know Adam has said that the Falcons aren't getting what they want in this deal yet, so that's why they are not going to pull the trigger.
Nobody ever gets what they want, right? The Eagles aren't getting what they want for Zach Ertz, and I'm sure the Packers will never get what they want for Aaron Rodgers. That's because teams, when you have stars, it hurts to have to part with them, and you never feel like you're getting value.
And the Eagles are similarly in the same place. They're not getting what they want for Zach Ertz either. Now, if they were to move Zach Ertz, Moshe, they will open up more cap space. What would they then do with said cap space?
Sign rookies, one, which it doesn't have to be all of them because you only have to be responsible for the top 51, right, on your entire 90 man right now. I think that's what it's at. And some of the rookies will fall into the outside the 51, but you do need money to sign rookies, although they do have some right now. Obviously, if you're talking contract extensions with certain players who are in rookie deals, like a Dallas Goedert, potentially a Jordan Mailata, potentially a Josh Sweat. I'm thinking of guys who have already played 3 years and are eligible. Those aren't the type of guys who you get lower cap numbers, right? Because they have low cap numbers right now to begin with. So when you give them an extension, their cap number raises. You need money to be able to give to them. Derek Barnett is a guy who is on his rookie deal, but because the number is so exorbitant on the 5th-year option at $10 million, he possibly could get a lower cap number in year one by getting an extension. But for the most part, the 3 other guys I mentioned, their cap numbers would probably go up because of an extension.
And I guess you could say, hey, well, now they have room to target a upgrade at corner. I saw, I forget who it was who did, it might have been CBS Sports did the corner top, I don't know, Pro Football Focus, I think, is doing their top 30 for entering the season of each position. They had Steven Nelson as the 13th best corner, and they had Slay at like 25th. So they're essentially saying if you brought Nelson in here, he'd be your best guy.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with those rankings. I'll say that right now. I've talked to 2 or 3 teams about Steven Nelson, including team that he's played for. And they view him as a solid number 2, number 3 type corner, a guy who at times kind of talks like he's better than he really is. So
that's pretty important.
He would be the second best corner on the Eagles by far. Yeah. I don't think there's any doubting that, but I'm not ready to put him ahead of Darius Slay.
I thought those, and look, PFF puts out their stuff. It's a lot of offseason stuff to just kind of build content and get people talking, which they do a good job of. But if you look at it, you would think, Jason Kelce, number 5 center in football. Lane Johnson, number 10 tackle. Brandon Brooks, top 10 offensive guard. I think Sayamala was even in the top 30. You have everybody on the line is one of the best players in the league. Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave are top 20 at their positions. Brandon Graham came in at number 14 at his spot. So apparently they think there's better talent than maybe some of the fans do.
That's possible. I wrote back in February that the offensive line and defensive line has talent on it. A lot of it wasn't healthy last year, but usually when you're good in the trenches, you can compete in games, and then it kind of comes down to how good does your quarterback play and how good is your coaching. So the Eagles are strong in the trenches theoretically. When you talk about rankings, I would ask, well, where was Carson Wentz ranked last year going into the year? Quarterbacks, probably top 10, top 11. He had just went 4-0 in December and then got hurt in Seattle. But, if people had pretty good vibes about what he did in December. I don't think anybody had him ranked as the 28th best quarterback in the NFL, but that's probably what he was last year. Maybe even lower than he might have been 30, 31. I haven't seen, I'm not going on any specific rankings, but the bottom line is that's the thing with these rankings. You just never know.
All right. Now, on that note, Anthony Harris, who they signed at safety in the offseason, was also written that was one of the best upgrades for any position in football last year, bringing Harris in to replace Mills. So I was kind of like, I feel like the Harris thing is kind of iffy because last year's interesting. He had 104 tackles, no picks. The year before, he had all these interceptions and very little tackles. So he's a tough guy, but apparently he's considered a pretty high-level upgrade over what you had the year before.
Wait, did you say the best upgrade in football? Rated?
They did the top 20 upgrades. In other words, this guy replaced him.
Right.
Like J.J. Watt replacing this guy, that was the best upgrade in football.
Okay.
So Anthony Harris replacing Jalen Mills made the list of the best upgrades for a team.
Oh, okay. Made the list. I thought you said was the best upgrade. I was like, wow, that's that would be crazy.
Number 18 on the list of all the upgrades.
That's pretty good. Yeah. Listen, obviously you're playing a whole different coverage here and a whole different scheme. And Anthony Harris has played in that scheme and started in that scheme and done a nice job in that scheme. I don't want to, overthink it here. I mean, he got his job because somebody else got hurt. Or when they were in their heyday as a defense, the Vikings, their defense was Andrew Sendejo. Their safeties were Andrew Sendejo and Harrison Smith. And Anthony Harris got a chance to move in there after some guys got hurt, and he played well enough to start, but he didn't get a long-term deal from the Vikings after getting the franchise tag, and he didn't get anything more than a 1-year deal from the Eagles. So I don't want to sit here and talk like we went through this last year with Will Parks, to be honest, where a lot of people got very, very excited about Will Parks' potential and Jim Schwartz's defense and, took a discount and yada, yada, yada. And he didn't even make it through the whole year. So I trust me, I think Anthony Harris is going to be
situation too.
Yes, it was. I think Anthony Harris is going to be a good upgrade. I think he's perfect. He'll make it through the year and hopefully he'll play well enough to earn an extension. But I don't want to, treat this like this is the same as, getting T.O. to replace Todd Pinkston or something. And it's not.
In your, by the way, just on a completely different note, because we're running out of time here, in your football history of covering NFL athletes with a meniscus tear, how long are they typically out for?
Oh, yeah, that's an interesting one because of the Embiid situation. So there's all types, and it's different for different positions in football. I've seen some offensive linemen either play through it or have a procedure and be back in 2 weeks. I think Todd Herman's was back basically in 2 weeks after a minor meniscus surgery, and 1 week was the bye week, so only missed like one game. But these guys just are they go back and forth and back and forth. There's not a lot of lateral movement all the time, and they can kind of play through that kind of pain. Like Joel, I mean, he's so agile, and all of his game is his Euro step and his cutting to the basket. It's hard for me to think that if he has even a slightly significant meniscus tear that he can play the same way. I think he can play, Mike, right? I mean, you can play through the pain. You might make it worse, though. You certainly can make a small tear into a bigger tear. But how do you get Joel to be Joel when he can't do some of those things? That's where I think it becomes really difficult.
Yeah, I agree. And look, even if he misses a week or two, are you getting the same Joel Embiid when he comes back? Probably not. And we've seen this play before. All right.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Geoff Mosher at Geoff Mosher NFL. The Inside the Birds podcast drops tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. And, of course, all the stuff on the Inside the Birds platform. Good Q&A this week. He's got some good stuff up over at InsideTheBirds.com. All right, Moshe, I'll talk to you, pal.
All right, thanks, man.
And Adam Kaplan is in tomorrow as we will continue our look at the Eagles offseason. As you heard Dallas Goedert speak today, they are working on an extension for him. When we come back, today is June the 2nd. So, on this day, do you remember? Stick around for that. The Sports Bash has that and more. This Celtics news is crazy today, by the way. And Coach K calling it quits. This will be his last season on the sidelines at Duke. More Sixers and Wizards coming up. A rank report, Todd Rank tonight at 5 o'clock on all the NBA playoffs land. Dame Lillard, unbelievable in a loss. And I talked about it before. How long is it before he just says, all right, I can't do this anymore? I mean, they're losing to a team that's missing its number 2 guy. I mean, Murray's out. And they still can't put away that Nuggets team. Jokic is really good. That just in. The Suns, 1 game away from getting the defending champs out. The Knicks and Hawks tonight. There's a lot of games tonight, by the way. I think there's 4 games on the slate. You got Knicks, Hawks, Grizzlies, Wizards, Grizzlies, Jazz, and then Clippers, Mavericks. That series is now tied 2-2. The away team has won every game in the Mavs-Clippers series. Go figure. We'll break those down with the rank report tonight here on the Sports Bash Live at 5. right, on this day, June the 2nd, do you remember these events occurring? We'll go through the list of what we got today. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. My producer is Josh Henning. These are events that happened on this day. So we'll pull these up in just a minute. Don't forget, you can watch the show live. Josh has a fresh cut on the video screen. How about that? Went with the fresh cut for the day?
I had this yesterday, too.
I know. I just forgot.
Or did you just not care yesterday? You cared today?
Today's tomorrow.
Today's a different day.
They're all different. They're all different.
As proven by Do You Remember?
Yes, they are. So what we got today? Let's take a look. All right, on this day, 1935, future Hall of Famer Babe Ruth announced his retirement as a player at 40 years of age. You know, that's another thing. We were talking about Wally Pipp yesterday.
Right.
Like, the guy's name's Babe Ruth. To be like this legendary figure, you couldn't come up with a name better than Babe Ruth. To be, hey, I'm the best baseball, or I'm the most recognizable baseball player ever.
Right.
Right? If his name was like Steve Jones,
nobody would care.
Right? Then it's not, but it's Babe Ruth. Like, you're the guy that got replaced. Oh, yeah, Wally Pipp.
Right.
You couldn't make that you couldn't plan that any better.
Yeah, it's very unlikely if you have a very common name that you are going to have a very illustrious life.
Michael Jordan.
It's not a common name. Like
Mike
Chuck
Jordan.
Smith.
Yeah, well, Mike Jordan.
Jordan, not that guy. I mean, like Smith, Jones.
Babe Ruth.
Like if LeBron James' name was Steve James, it wouldn't be the same.
Nope. No, it wouldn't. On this day, 1941, 16 years to the date after replacing Wally Pipp, Lou Gehrig died from ALS. Now, yesterday, we talked about getting Wally pipped.
Right.
How ironic is that? It was on the same day.
Today is Lou Gehrig Day in Major League Baseball.
So weird that happened. 1941.
Is it more weird or less weird that today is the first year we're going to have Lou Gehrig Day?
I wonder why they decided of all the years to say, hey, you know what? Let's do Lou Gehrig Day. It's like George Costanza in that Seinfeld. How about Joe Pepitone Day? Remember that one?
No, but it sounds funny.
1987, Major League Baseball draft. The Seattle Mariners drafted Ken Griffey Jr. with the number 1 overall pick. It happened on this day, 1987. Now, were you a card collector growing up, baseball card?
Yeah.
The Ken Griffey Jr. Upper Deck card.
Yes.
That was the card. It was the first ever Upper Deck. Upper Deck when they first launched, 1989.
Yeah, that was card number 1.
It was card number 1, the Ken Griffey Jr. rookie. That card, you would literally ride your bike to the card store every day trying to buy a pack of Upper Deck to get the Ken Griffey Jr. card.
Yeah, instead you end up with a bunch of Ron Darlings.
Yeah, just a bunch of commons. That's something that the kids don't do nowadays, I'm sure, is ride their bike to the card store and just hang out there all day long watching other people open up their pack of cards.
Well, first of all, they have the digital card opening things now. They do online.
Do they even have
those?
Right? Do they even have baseball card stores anymore?
No. You know what's ironic? There's no more baseball or sports card stores. Almost no collectible stores anymore. But there's still comic book stores. How does that work?
I don't know, because the comic book people are an odd breed to keep those stores in business.
Thank you.
How do the baseball card stores go out of business? I mean, there was people in those things nonstop. The baseball card guy would say, yeah, no one was buying anything. Everyone was just watching the other guy open his pack.
Right.
I mean, God almighty, we would hang out there all day long.
Now, were you someone who had cards and tried to trade with people?
Oh, yeah. I was a card collector. I had a lot of cards. So there was a baseball card store. I grew up in Margate, in Ventnor. There was one all the way down the one end of Margate. Mm-hmm. There was another one that was kind of in like the middle area, like somewhere around Essex Avenue, down the side street. And then there was one in Ventnor that was right off Ventnor Avenue where like JoJo's Pizza was. There was a little baseball card store down there. So we would literally ride our bike and hit all of them and just hang out there like all day long. Like one day you would hang out the one that was down by Washington Avenue. The next day you would hang out the one on Essex Avenue. I think it used to be like near Goldfinger Hair Salon, if that's still there, down Essex Avenue there. And then the other one was in Ventnor. You went there, right? Goldfinger Hair Salon.
That's a Bond villain.
They were actually Goldfinger Hair Salon was one of the minor league baseball team names in Margate. Like if you were on maybe T-ball or
Goldfinger
minors.
was a Bond villain.
There you go. Well, that was the name of the hair salon. And they had a baseball card store right next door to it. So it didn't last long, that baseball card store.
So really quick, in Sea Isle, there was a baseball card, sports card / comic book store in Sea Isle. And I used to live on 42nd Street. And this store was in between 46th and 47th Street.
A baseball card store?
Baseball card / comic book collectible store. So they got a little bit of everything in there. The guy, you would go in the store and it was just jammed full. Like he crammed any little thing he possibly could into this store.
Yeah. Well, the baseball card stores, all of these stores were very small. They were like these tiny little, like the size of this room would be like the store. The guy stood behind the counter all day and he's BSing with 12-year-olds all day.
Yep.
Right? Here's some old guy, mustache, cigarette, BSing with a bunch of 12-year-olds on their bike.
Definitely the cigarette. My guy didn't have a mustache, but he always looked like he didn't shave for 2 days. Just totally disheveled.
We got to bring that back. Over on the text board. Love the George reference, Mike. Next thing you know, they're going to change to cotton uniforms. Yep, Joe Pepitone Day. That was Bodysuit Man, I think. Baseball card prices are going through the roof. Pretty much every sport is right now, but leave the great Ron Darling out of this. That's from Cole and LBI. Yeah, ask Lenny Dykstra what he thinks of Ron Darling.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, that one's...
That's an interesting story.
All right, more text messages coming. Did anybody else go to the baseball card store, just hang out there all day?
That and the arcade.
Well, the arcade's still around. You still do that.
Well, there's not as many of them.
Just pumping quarters in all day. Target won't sell cards because of people fighting over them, apparently.
Really?
Text message. All right, let me check what else we got on this day. Randy Johnson threw a no-hitter, 2-0 win over the Tigers at the Kingdom, 1990. Big unit.
Big unit. I have a Expos card of his.
People forget he played for the Expos.
That's the only way I knew I played for the Expos, because I had an Expos card.
2010, Detroit Tigers pitcher Armando Galarraga retired the first 26 batters in the game against the Indians. On the 27th out, umpire Jim Joyce incorrectly called Jason Donald, former Philly prospect, safe on a ground ball. Galarraga retired the next batter and finished with a 3-0 win. After the game, Joyce apologized to Galarraga and the media, and the pitcher publicly forgave him, saying no one's perfect. The game has many monikers, including the 28-out perfect game. So he didn't get credited with the perfect game. The umpire, remember that one? I remember that one vividly.
I remember that vividly, and I remember how I couldn't understand how baseball couldn't just give him
a replay game. By then. No replay in 2010.
They should have made an exception.
What are you going to do? No replay.
We all saw the same thing.
Apparently Joyce didn't until after the fact. I mean, he admitted, I got it wrong. And then Galarraga said, no one's perfect.
Yeah,
it's probably better remembered for this than it would be if he actually did it.
Maybe.
What's Galarraga doing now? Nothing.
Nothing. He's out of baseball.
He got his name mentioned. If he threw a perfect game, he might not have made my Do You Remember?
He's actually the second best Galarraga.
That's right.
Does anybody in the audience know the other Galarraga? Is my question.
Big Cat.
Played for the Rockies, played for the Braves.
Expos, come on.
Right, started with the Expos. He played with the Giants at 1.2.
Andres Galarraga. 1995, speaking of the Expos, they spent their 18th round pick, number 507, on standout catcher Tom Brady, who elected to play football at the University of Michigan before becoming the quarterback for the New England Patriots. Brady and Barry Bonds graduated from the same high school.
This is true, yeah.
How about that? I did not know that.
Yeah. Somebody else famous graduated from that high school, too, but I forget who it was.
I did not know that, and nor did I know that Brady got drafted by the Expos.
I did remember that because they talked about it in one of the Brady documentaries.
Interesting. There's a lot of guys like that. Like I think Danny Ainge is another guy who was drafted by the Celtics and the Blue Jays.
Yeah, Danny Ainge. You had a couple other players in a lot of sports were drafted by multiple
Dave
teams.
Winfield was drafted multiple sports.
Yes, he was.
2011, Dallas Mavericks come back from being 15 down to beat the Heat. 95-93, Game 2 of the NBA Finals. The Mavs won 3 of the next 4. They beat the Heat. That was the LeBron, Bosh, Wade first year, 2000. Think about that. That was 10 years ago that whole Miami Heat thing was.
J.J. Barea.
Oh, man.
The memories, right?
10 years ago. And just think about this. It was on this day. We're still in the first round.
I know,
that was
right?
the NBA Finals.
The calendar's so off right now.
I know. Somebody was tweeting last night about how the clock's all off, that it feels like it should be the finals. I mean, the finals usually start right now.
Yeah, usually the conference finals end the weekend of Memorial Day weekend.
Tom from the Villas, I always wound up getting stupid managers cards.
Yeah, trying to remember what the one manager I got a bunch was.
There was a comic book store above where the old Stop and Go Video was. That eventually moved near the former Cardiff Circle.
Okay.
The Cardiff store was called Fantasy Factory. Interesting. There was the store in Ventnor, the baseball card store in Ventnor. I think it was like this peach color building, and it was very like, you would never know. It just said like baseball cards on it. Like it didn't even have a name. I don't know that any of the baseball card stores actually had, like Margate Baseball Cards might have been the name of the store.
I think the name of the one in Seattle was like Sports Cards and Collectibles. It was in a very nondescript strip mall that is no longer there anymore. It's now a condominiums that happen to have a couple stores in the bottom of it.
Gotcha. Yeah, the one in the middle of Margate, well, like Essex Avenue, it was like this building. The door kind of was like catty corner to like, so it wasn't like facing the street. It was,
okay,
and that one wasn't there. But the one in Margate down the other end, I don't think any of them had a name. But the one in Ventnor, it looked like it was like one of those like shady storefronts. It just had like this blah look to it. But
maybe it was a front for something
great
else.
Baseball card stores. Here's a weird fact. Back in 1980, Terry Bradshaw checked into a hotel with a made-up name. The name he used was Tom Brady. That's interesting. Is that real?
Yeah, that's a true story, apparently, because they both are nicknamed with TB.
There was a card store next to the Hot Bagels and More in Summers Point. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one.
I don't remember that one either.
Man, I don't know where that is. I know where the Hot Bagels is in Summers Point. I don't know. I don't remember the baseball card store, though.
Yes,
I didn't live off
store.
the island, though, until I was older. All right, good stuff today.
Good times.
If anybody remembers the name of the baseball card stores on the island, let me know. Or anywhere. I love to hear all the names of these places. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash, live on 97.3 ESPN. Download the free mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle. And don't forget, watch the show live. When we come back, Dr. Jeremy Boyd will give us some insight on the Joel Embiid injury. How long realistically will he miss? Stick around. Find out next.
Now, back to the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN.
All right, this is obviously some bad news. Could it be worse? We're about to find out. Dr. Jeremy Boyd, Trifecta Therapeutics, board-certified orthopedic sports physical therapist, located right in Glassboro, New Jersey. One of the most trained and highest credentialed sports physical therapists in the entire Philadelphia region. So he'll give us a little insight on this whole Joel Embiid injury. And unfortunately, this is what you come to expect. Doc, what's going on, man?
How's it going, Mike?
Everything is good. So here we go. This seemed inevitable, right? When we started this conversation between you and I and these injuries, Joel Embiid, a small lateral meniscus tear in his right knee. So kind of give us the lowdown on what, when you hear that, I come to you, that's my injury. Dr. Boyd, what happens?
Yeah, so the first thing we think of is, yes, you can be seen with physical therapy. That's usually the first line of defense for these type of injuries. So usually, I mean, it seems pretty terrifying, but that is something that we can definitely help out with. But being his type of profession, his position as well, and how they're at the tail end of the season or the playoffs, this adds some complexity to it. So I'm a little concerned, to be honest.
So it's a lateral meniscus tear. Mm-hmm. The Sixers said the injury will not be treated with surgery, but with physical therapy and treatment program. They're listing him as day-to-day. Does that make you feel any different?
The fact that they're listing him day-to-day does make me feel a little bit different. It probably says that it's a non-obstructive type of tear, especially with the meniscal tears. If it gets caught within the joint, those are a little bit more serious, and that means they're probably going to go down the surgery route, and that's going to be 6 months right there. But still, nonetheless, if it's an acute tear, it's a fresh one, it's still going to take time. I don't think he'll be back by the end of this series, and I'd be surprised, if he's back up and running by the next series, whoever they play against.
It was reported that managing potential swelling and pain in the knee is going to play a significant part in how soon Embiid will return to the floor. So if you're just hearing, hey, it's a small lateral tear, how typical is that pain and swelling out of that knee area?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to definitely happen. That's just how the human body works, especially if it's an acute tear. If you MRI most individuals, especially of athletes and those sort of things, they're going to potentially have a meniscus tear, even if they don't have pain. So it is something extremely common in our asymptomatic or no pain patients. So it's really, when did that occur? And it seemed, based off of his history with having 2 knee injuries already this year, and this one was his right, which was the earlier of the 3 total. They probably have an MRI on that. So it seems obviously that happened, last night or 2 nights ago. So it's going to have to go through the normal physiology of swelling and loss of range of motion, potentially even loss of strength as well. So how quickly they can mitigate that and restore all that motion, get that swelling out, will really dictate whether he comes back sooner or later.
So if this is the injury, what kind of program, what kind of stuff is he doing? What kind of stuff would you be putting him through to get him back out there the fastest?
So main thing to start off with is, again, restoring that range of motion. Some swelling is helpful. It's beneficial. It is bringing nutrients to the area, but you do want to manage if it gets excessive. Too much swelling will actually lead to decreased quad strength and more loss of range of motion. So we start off typically with manual therapy, any of our hands-on techniques. We have a lot of great of those on our social media if you ever want to check them out. But that's what's going to restore that range of motion the quickest. Whether it's a joint technique, kind of like a manipulation of sorts, or some soft tissue stuff to kind of flush out that swelling. That would probably be the big things. And then, any other concomitant parts of that injury, whether it's a loss of strength or stability control, that's when the exercises come in. And then from there, we transition to like a return to sport program. So hopefully, obviously, there's a lot more on the line with it being the playoffs, so they're going to speed that all along. And he's going to have to, this is a pain tolerance thing. It's not going to be, all of a sudden he's going to feel great by the end of the playoffs. He's going to have to kind of grin and bear it for a little bit. If he can do that, then he'll be able to play, but he won't probably be at 100% this quick in the game.
We've heard, in the past, you guys in the NFL play with this injury. There's been times where offensive linemen just, pain tolerance. We hear a lot of that. What's the possible of injuring it worse, though, if you go out there and play with this small lateral meniscus tear?
Yeah, you can. You can tear it even more so. They didn't go into the details of what style tear. There's 6 total styles. Hopefully it was on the outside of the meniscus, which is going to has better healing than the inside of the meniscus, which is doesn't have as much of a blood supply. But the lateral meniscus, especially, it blends into components of your ACL, so that's a risk, and it provides overall stability to compression and tensile forces, like pulling away and getting kind of pushed together. So if it's not quite right, or if you have additional swelling into the joint and that messes up your strength and your stability or your control of the knee, yeah, we do have some risks of potentially some other injuries, more acutely in the next couple of weeks to months versus way down the road.
So if I say, okay, no surgery, the injury will be managed with the physical therapy, what is in your mind, you've seen a lot of these people come to you for this same injury. How long before they come to you do you say you can go back out there and do strenuous physical activity?
This is a great it depends question on in the medical world. Again, really depends on how he tolerates things. I typically, most athletes shouldn't, push past a 6 or 8 out of 10 pain. So really that's one thing, and that's very subjective on the client. But he's got to, go through all his return to sport things. So probably the earliest would probably be a thing in 2 weeks. And if that's, at the end of the playoffs, the championships in July. So we're coming kind of close, and that would be the earliest probably. And then anything past that, you're probably looking more at the, the month marker at minimum.
I figure 2 to 3 is like best case scenario.
Yeah, way best. So
day to day sounds a little optimistic.
Yeah, and that's trying to keep hope for everybody. So who knows?
Not good. Dr. Jeremy Boyd, Trifecta Sports Rehab, Trifecta Therapeutics. Check them out, trifectatherapeutics.com. And he can help you out with stuff like this. And if you have something that's bothering you, he's board certified orthopedics, one of the top highest credentialed sports physical therapists in the entire state of New Jersey and the entire region. And I hope that was a good explanation for people to not maybe get your hopes up, but they do have the best of the best of the best out there working on them, I guess. So hopefully 2 to 3 weeks is the bare minimum. Doc, good to see you, man. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, Mike.
Absolutely. Dr. Jeremy Boyd there here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. And there you go. You saw him live on the video stream. And, of course, if you're listening on the free mobile app, there you go. So I said right before he jumped on 2 to 3 weeks. I feel about that's being optimistic, which isn't good. All right, on the other side, Rank Report. Todd Rank is here. We will talk a little bit about this. Hey, they got to figure out a way to get through this series, hopefully get some days off. Ben Simmons, first person out in the court. What was he doing? Practicing his free throws. That according to John Clark at NBC Sports Philadelphia. I'm sure you guys all like to hear that. By the way, Phillies game got rained out today. For those of you who were wondering what happened with the Phils after they scored 17 runs last night. All right. Rank Report. Todd Rank, former Sports Bash co-host, joins me on the video stream. Coming up next. All right, driving home on a Wednesday night where the news came down today there will be no Joel Embiid, and you just heard from Dr. Jeremy Boyd, who said he'd be pretty surprised if we saw Joel Embiid for the next 2 to 3 weeks minimally, and said probably longer with this injury. That's the news today. Not good news. Todd Rank Report is here. Todd Rank, former co-host of this very show. Now, we battled all day today, back and forth, and I think my thumbs hurt from the amount of texts that we sent back and forth. But that was before this news came out. Joel Embiid out. Now, we talked a little bit about this last night, and we had our Sixers insider Paul Hudrick on earlier and some others, and many people believe if Embiid is out, they're not sure they get through the Atlanta Hawks.
Well, this is devastating, Mike. I mean, you talk about 2-3 weeks, and to your point, we were talking earlier this morning, and we were talking about, a meniscus tear. That's not a strained hamstring, and even that's not good for AD out here. I mean, 2 to 3 weeks, Mike. Now, here's what we've talked about the last couple of days. This is devastating for the Sixers long term, and even long term within these playoffs. But I still concede. I'm not worried about the Washington Wizards series.
No, I think they'll win the game tonight.
Right. So I think they're going to get through the Wizards. The question will be the Atlanta Hawks, as you said. I still think that with the coaching that you have and the rest of the team, how it's composed, that I think still the Sixers are a better team than the Hawks, even without Joel Embiid. I know he's the focal point. I understand he's an MVP candidate, but I don't believe that they drop off that significantly considering the other pieces to the puzzle. I think they should be able to beat the Atlanta Hawks.
I mean, look, I think it definitely evens the series out. No question about it. If they were a favorite, a significant favorite, I talked about it before, Todd. If you right now did a draft between the Sixers and the Wizards, you're taking Bradley Beal now as the first pick. He's the best player between these two teams. Now, I don't know who the second pick is. Who are you taking next? You taking Westbrook, Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons?
I'd probably lean to Westbrook.
Right. Well, they have the two best players on the floor.
I mean, I'm not going to dispute it with you, but I still think as a team, defensively, you're the better team. Right? You've got length on your team still. What's really disappointing, Mike, is we talk about this back and forth. You only get a small window. I know that this team has been building themselves up to have longevity, have young stars on the team. But to get a window to have an opportunity to win a championship, to be a number one seed, have everything set up for you, have the home court. If you're going to go up against this big, bad Brooklyn Nets team, should it be, or even Giannis with Milwaukee, you've got the home court. And to not be able to have your best player at this time, it's devastating, Mike, because you don't know what this team will look like next year.
You just mentioned it, Todd, which is the fact that, look, Brooklyn, everybody thinks they're the favorite. Everybody thinks they're the best. And the way that Milwaukee just steamrolled through Miami, it's now people think this is the finals right here, that these two teams playing in round two are the two best teams left in the entire tournament on either side of the ledger. And here's Philadelphia saying, hey, no one's talking about us. We have home court advantage, and we have a style that's so different from what you do. You take Joel Embiid not being 100% out of that mix, it's just an absolute devastating blow for them that, quite frankly, you're right about the window thing. Like, you only get so many options. Now, you can make the argument, look, Ben Simmons is 24, Joel Embiid's 26, that window should be – most teams' window doesn't start until these guys are 30, 28, 30 years old because it's a grind to get good in the NBA. The Sixers have been lucky that their young players were ready to get them to significant heights early enough in their careers. Now, they haven't won a title, but this is the time when they're in their 27, 28, that they got to start trying to get to some finals appearances here.
Well, if you want to look silver lining to this whole story, Mike, do you want to look at this and say, okay, Doc came in and said, in essence, Embiid, this is your team. But now that he's hurt, and it may be out 2 weeks, maybe out the rest of the playoffs,
I don't think we see him for 2 to 3 weeks minimum.
I mean, I only think he comes back possibly if they make it to the NBA Finals. I don't know that they're going to have him for that Eastern Conference Final should they get there. But my question would be, is this now the moment for Ben Simmons? Does this give him carte blanche to say, okay, there is no Embiid. In essence, I have to take this team. This is my team now for the next couple of weeks. What can I do to showcase that I am a 1B right behind Embiid? Because again, we argued this about the free throw shooting. I know he has the drive into the hoop. I know he has the defense and he's long. But this is where we come back to, can he shoot the ball consistently? Can he do things that this team needs him to do, Mike? Because without Embiid, he's got to be able to still drive, kick out to the open three-point shooters. But at some point, Mike, he's got to make not only the free throws, but he's got to make that mid-range jumper to at least put fear into the team.
That's not, yeah, it would be perfect, but that's not the way this team was built. It's not going to change overnight that we're going to just change. They're not going to just change the philosophy of how this team was built. They built this team. You said it, and you're right. Brett Brown, I think, wanted to toe the line of whose team this is. It's not Ben's, it's not Joel's, it's both of their teams. I think Doc Rivers came in and said, this is Joel, this is your team, you're the guy. And that made Ben feel like, I don't have to score because that's not what I do well. And Doc recognized that. I don't think he can just change in the middle of this now and say, hey, Ben, now we need you to score. Sorry. That's where the problem comes in a little bit.
Well, and is it a bigger problem? We talked about this is, if your star is a center in this league, and again, I know Joel can shoot threes, he can do everything. So when we talk about positioning, it's really a different game in the NBA today. But let's just say a big man. If the big man is the star on your team, Mike, does it limit your team should he get injured? For example, if you've got a three-point guy.
Realistically, though, seriously, any team that loses an MVP candidate, the whole team is changed.
Agreed. But does it change more when your number one is the big man and you don't have that presence because that's how you run your offense inside to out, as opposed to if I lose a three-point shooter, Mike, my inside game, the way we move the ball, it doesn't change as much.
Hard to say. There's no other Embiid. I guess you could say Jokic. Those two guys are.
Yeah. And
Denver lost Murray, and here they're still churning through these playoffs because they have Jokic. Now, The problem is if Ben Simmons went, see, this is where the Sixers are so different because no one in the league is like Embiid, and no one in the league is like Simmons. There's just no other players like either one of those two guys, and they happen to be on the same team. If the Sixers lose Simmons, they got no shot. They have such a little shot. If Simmons goes out, they got zero shot because of what he does on defense. When he left for 4 games a couple weeks ago, they were so discombobulated because he controls the whole tempo of the game. He controls if we want to go up and down, if we want to slow it down, if we're going to shoot threes. And he gets these wide open looks for everybody else. When he goes out, they're a mess. So it's just a weird dynamic that they have these two players that really nobody else in the league has.
Well, but with Embiid out, does it show Simmons' weaknesses much more? Like, does it show those liabilities more because Embiid's not there?
That's a good question, because to me what it does is, see, why Simmons right now is so difficult, and people don't like this because what do fans like? They like points. They like scoring. So if you don't score points, you must not be any good. But Simmons doesn't score a lot of points. But what he does is he draws so much attention that a guy like Steph Curry never has anybody near him. He's shooting wide open threes. So what? Seth Curry's now shooting 45% from three-point range. Well, he's wide open every night. Danny Green never has a hand in his face because everybody goes, 2 guys are on Embiid, and the other guy goes to Simmons, which means the 2 shooters are always wide open. And when you take Embiid out, They don't have to double him, and that means the guy doesn't have to sag off the shooter to come to Simmons. He can stay on the shooter. I mean, you're not going to double team Dwight Howard.
Well, and I was just going to say, so what does Doc do now? The question is, does he put Dwight as the starting set? I mean, does he play small?
Well, he's been starting Mike Scott, who you can't keep playing Mike Scott, man. He's terrible.
You don't believe Mike Scott?
He's awful.
You don't believe Mike Scott replaces Embiid?
Well, for some reason, Doc Rivers believes he does. God's sake. But I think what you got to do is you got to play Simmons at the 5.
Wow. And then who gets more time? Do you
style? You play Magic. You play Ben Simmons as the center.
Yeah, and
you
then
bring that kid Maxey in.
By the way, I love Maxey. By the way, I just love that kid. I love his energy. I love the way he plays. He drives. He attacks. I think he's going to be a nice piece.
By the way,
what's that?
Some of these text messages. By the way, this gentleman says, "I just saw Todd the other day on a repeat of Deal or No Deal."
Now they continue to put it on there, and I get not one dime from those residuals.
Tell your boy Todd next time to do a little Journey, Don't Stop Believing for us.
Well, I have continued to do it out here on the West Coast. Maybe next time I come on, you lead me in with that. That'd be a nice song to lead me in with. PG would have done that.
Ooh, on Sunday at my house for the barbecue, that karaoke mic was getting passed around the room at a high level.
Ooh.
A couple ballads, baby. Now, you can't play Mike Scott. I mean, to me, you got to play Ben Simmons at the 5 and go with either Maxey or bring Thibault in and start him, because the problem is you take Ben Simmons off of Beal, then that becomes a problem. The problem, Beal is somewhat in check because Simmons takes him out of the game.
Right. And now, here's the deal. This is going to be an interesting game tonight. To your point, I think the Sixers can still win it tonight.
Yeah,
but
I think what happened in the last game, Todd, is when Embiid started the game and then left in the middle, you're kind of like, oh, what the heck? Now you have 2 days to kind of say, all right, he's out. This is what we're going to do.
Right. But I will say, and it is a home game, which is helpful. I mean, I watched that Lakers game yesterday, and that was a disaster. And they pretty much knew. They pretended like they didn't know if AD was going to go. AD didn't go, and you saw what the Suns did.
He's they went the rest of that series.
What's that?
He's not playing the rest of that series.
No. That hamstring's done. And don't get me wrong. I called you when we did the first round matchups. I had the Suns winning that series. The reality is they're a better team, but it certainly helps when you don't have AD with LeBron. And that's where tonight I'm going to be interested, because it's not about this series, Mike. It's what are the Atlanta Hawks watching? What are the Brooklyn Nets watching? How does Washington attack the Sixers without Embiid, and how effective is that when we talk about the game tonight? At home, I still think they can win it. Now, if Washington wins this game, Mike, now you're just well, I wonder. I mean, it's not any better to lose the game. I'm just trying to think. The longer time, the more time you get to kind of, maybe you go a 7-game series in Atlanta. That helps to get Embiid back, maybe. I don't know.
Well, yeah, because the Knicks Hawks, they play tonight. The Knicks,
right.
They win tonight. It goes back to Atlanta for Friday. Then their game 7 is Sunday. Same as the Sixers. The Sixers play Friday, Sunday. But you got to get this thing wrapped up and get it over with, and then just.
You hope that goes 7 games, that Atlanta Knicks game.
That's the game, because if the Knicks win tonight, and let's say Atlanta wins tonight and the Sixers win tonight, do they start that series earlier?
Of course they do.
Right? They're not going to wait till Tuesday to get that thing going. They're going to say, all right, that series is set. Let's get it going.
Right. I mean, most likely, wouldn't it start probably Sunday?
Wow. Yeah, probably. I would imagine they would say, look, Sunday, we want that thing on. We got Hawks, Sixers, second round. Well, because you got Saturday is Brooklyn, Milwaukee.
And that's already second round coverage. So, I mean, the West is taking a little more time. I mean, I think the Clippers series
are all 2-2.
Exactly. Clippers are going to go. It's going to take probably 7 games. And now the Lakers may be the one that goes out. They're 3-2. That's probably going to be 6, I would think.
Now, tonight's interesting because there's no Embiid. Does Washington start Hack-a-Ben 5 minutes left in the game?
Well, it's going to be dictating on the score, right? I mean, we're going to base it on now. We talked about this. They started hacking him in the last game, and the game was tied at that time. So
2 minutes and 47 seconds is when they fouled him, and the game was tied at 108.
So they were willing to take a 2-point, to be trailing by 2 points if he goes up to the line and makes those free throws. So the point is, if it's anywhere within a 5-point game, one way or the other, I think they're fouling him. I don't think there's any question. It's only if the Sixers are up. Well, even if the Sixers are up 10, they may start fouling him to try and get back in.
Right, because if you're up 10 and you start fouling him and he goes, I mean, see, Doc Rivers' explanation was, if we get 1 point every time down the court, we're okay with that. That's predicated, though, on the other team not scoring.
Or that they're not scoring 3-pointers every time, right? Because then you're gaining 2.
That's where the Sixers, the game was tied. He makes 1. And at the end of that 42nd, he went to the line 3 times. They ended up down 2. But part of that is because they couldn't get a stop. They gave up the dunk, then they gave up the other shot. They gave up the bucket to Beal, and then the dunk by Hachimura. So they're getting 4 points. Plus, they got a free throw, 5, and you only got 3. So you ended up being down 2 with 2 minutes left to go. Now, that being said, there's 2 minutes left to go. You're down 2. You got to get stops and win that game. You can win that game still. But I don't know if they're going to employ that strategy again if he's making 1 out of 2.
And the other problem is, say the Sixers are trailing by 5 points. Does the Wizards go, we're going to foul him to see if he's only making 1 and we can and just keep the lead, as opposed to allowing them a 3-point shot by Curry or Danny Green? Would we rather take our chances with Simmons missing 1 or maybe even 2 and getting the ball back? That's a lost possession for the Sixers. It's going to be interesting how they implore this, because
now the analytic people will tell you that what they did the other night, Washington, was a bad strategy. They say if the guy makes 46% or more, you should not foul him on purpose.
Right. Well, and I'll tell you another analytic mistake would be not fouling Damian Lillard last night at any point in the first overtime, in the end of regulation.
They still lost.
They might have wanted to foul him, though. I'm just saying, that was one of the greatest performances I've ever seen. Hopefully you were awake for it, because that was unbelievable.
Well, I said, how long is it before he says, I can't keep doing this? I mean, it's the whole thing. We're stuck in the middle. This is who we are. I'm Dame Lillard. We can't get any other good players here. This is who we are.
Well, I will say this, Mike. They've got other good players. That coach simply doesn't demand defense. And that's why he won't be there next year. I mean, I can call that right now. He will not be back next year. That team doesn't play defense.
Well, nobody out west does.
Well, come on. You get a Doc. This is what I mean. You get a Doc Rivers to come into Philly. When he came to the Clippers, they played defense. They just choked it up last year. The reality is he gets a team to play defense. You got to get a coach that implores defense, because they've got enough. McCollum and Lillard are one of the top 3 pairings in the league in the backcourt.
I mean, yeah, you got those 2, but other than that, I mean, they're like the Wizards. They got nothing else.
Well, Nurkic came back from injury. Now he's playing really well. Carmelo's in the highlight, but I'll be honest, he's been playing really well this year, Carmelo.
I mean, that's this is the perpetual conversation that goes around and round and round in circles. Is Portland is that team that they're the 6th seed and they can't be any better. They can't get out of it. That's who they are.
Yeah, but they've got a star on that team. I mean, the reality is
that's the thing. They got the one.
Yeah.
The problem is how do I get that other one?
Well, and the hard part is you're not really, there's not many options to replace a McCollum. McCollum's really, really good.
Yeah.
Unless you get a Steph Curry to come up next to Dame, you're not going to replace McCollum.
Steph Curry. They found Dame Lillard like when nobody really knew. Like they drafted, they made the smart pick. They got Lillard. What was he, like the 5th, 6th, 7th pick, somewhere in that range? So it wasn't like he was the number 1 pick. They didn't like lose purposely and say, we got to get Dame Lillard. No, they got Dame Lillard when people didn't really know who he really was. So you luck out with that pick. The problem has become he's so good that he brings you to the middle of the basically the pecking order, and they can't get him another guy. It's a shame.
Yeah, but you got to look at those. You got to look at the scores of those games this year. they're scoring 140 and losing the game. I mean, you just can't do it. And that, to me, that when we talk about who's to blame, the player, the coach, when you're talking about a team consistently who can score and simply can't hold teams under 120 points, I'm sorry. I got to put the blame on the coach on that. I just do. And people could yell and scream and say, hey, look, the players are playing. They should be able to have respect enough to play defense. But there are schemes and there are double teams and there are things that the coach is putting together, and this team simply doesn't do it. And I watched last night, Dame Lillard's playing defense. I mean, he's trying to play defense. But when the rest of these guys don't know what they're doing and they're falling on their butts and there's wide open threes, it's devastating to watch because the kid is really special. Look, he's still got some time, Mike.
They're the worst defensive team in the playoffs. Except for the two teams that are worse or the same are Brooklyn and Milwaukee. Those two teams both give up 114, and Portland gives up 114.
And that's just for the playoff run so far or through the season?
That's the regular season. They average those three teams give up 114 a game.
Well, and I can give you an answer for Brooklyn. They were never a team. I mean, they had how many different combinations? So I would rather watch Brooklyn now and dictate how many points are they going to give up now with this unit fully healthy, because I think it'll be less, right? I think it'll be a better average. And again, they can outscore teams, of course, but they at least have a mentality of trying to play defense.
Oh, look, Portland, that team, it's a shame. I said this the other day, watching Lillard the other night. I said, at what point does he just say, I can't do this anymore? I've given you all I got. This is as good as we're going to be. I mean, they went to the Western Conference Finals a couple of years ago. They got swept out. This is who I can't do it. I can't keep doing this. Portland, I love you. I gave you my heart and soul. It's time for me to go.
Well, and how many more years does he have, right? I mean, when we talk about the sweet spot, I know he can be in the league for a while, but the sweet spot for his career, another 3-4 years is the sweet spot, and then he's going to start to decline.
I mean, you would think this is what you're talking about. Like, you get these guys, and here's Dame Lillard. He's 30 years old right now. Like, how many more years is he this guy? I mean,
yeah. But that brings up the other question, Mike, and we can talk about it later or in another time. But the question that I don't know if you posed it to your listeners is, who do you want your star to be? And again, we talk about injury prone. Do you want a big man as your star, or do you want that point guard as your star, or that 3-point specialist as your star, right? Because health-wise, is injury just too big of an issue for the big men?
Yeah, I mean, here's the problem. Like, there's only, like, you talk about, oh, you don't need to do that. This team didn't need to do that. No, there's 3 teams that have won titles in, like, the last, it's whatever team LeBron's on, Cleveland, Miami, the Lakers, the Warriors crew.
Right.
Other than wherever LeBron or that Warriors crew, what other teams are like the model of what to do? It's like everybody is just stuck in this. We don't have a player that is the best player. Like, you have to have that guy. You have to have LeBron. You have to have Durant. You have to have Curry. That's it. If you don't have one of those guys, you're screwed.
Well, and let's not forget Kawhi. Kawhi made the move, and he did it with the Raptors.
In there, yes.
Yeah, Raptors and Spurs. But to your point,
that guy, it's like you could have Dame Lillard, you could have Devin Booker and Chris Paul, and you can have all the James Harden. James Harden by himself, not good enough. James Harden with Russell Westbrook, not good enough. James Harden with Chris Paul, not good enough. You have to have a player who's on the next level above those guys. And that is where Joel Embiid is. He's on the next level above those players. The problem is, because he's so unique, what makes him unique? His size and his ability to do things that guards do. The problem is at 7 foot, 280 pounds, he is now injured. He can't be relied on.
And that's really the hard part, because there's only a few, right? The Nowitzkis, you get these guys that can handle the ball, can get in low, can shoot the 3, can pass the ball. But again, I always say this, Mike, 7-foot men were not meant to run up and down a basketball court for 35 minutes, and we've turned them into that.
A guy that is one of the 5 most unique players on planet Earth. What am I supposed to do? Just say I'm not going to take him?
Well, I mean, at some point, here's the thing, though. If AD got the championship with LeBron last year, right? But AD, we're looking at the same exact thing. He's been injury prone throughout his career. He can't lead a team. So if you start to see the breakdown, then don't you have to almost when you're looking in the future?
Well, that's what happened. That year, Cleveland said, he's hurt. I can't take him. We need to win now. They took Anthony Wiggins. Well, guess what? Anthony Wiggins is on his third team already.
Right.
Milwaukee said, we're ready to win. We can't throw a season away. They took Jabari Parker. I don't even think he's in the league anymore.
Well, he's playing last night.
Who, Jabari Parker?
Yeah. He was on the Celtics.
Oh, my gosh. No wonder that team stinks.
Come on. He's a good kid. Good kid. He got injury too, though. He got injury.
He did get injured. But that's the point is, and then the Sixers said, look, you could take those guys. They might not be hurt. I'll take the guy that's hurt. I'll even wait 2 years for him because he's more he has the ability to take me to a spot that those two guys definitely can't.
It's a risk reward, right? What's the risk?
Total.
Yeah.
The total, it's a catch-22. What are you supposed to do? You're taking a guy that when he's healthy, you can be the best player. Like, I don't know, if he makes it through one season and wins you the title, is it worth it? Yeah.
Well, we could have said that. We could have said, yes, it was worth it if he could have stayed healthy this playoffs.
Well, I'm saying he's 26 years old. Let's say 28 years old. He gets that magical season where he's healthy and he takes you there. You look back and say, yeah, I mean, even now, we battle. I said, look, this team is in a way better position than they've been in my entire lifetime. They've never been a team that you ever believed that could, even when they had Iverson that year, that team was short. They didn't have the talent to compete. That was a team that was they were like the 93 Phillies.
But are you saying that, Mike? If you say that and that as a team, they're in a much better place now, shouldn't that be then that there's more collection of players than just Embiid? If Embiid never plays again, they should still be.
Because when Cleveland won a title because they had LeBron. When LeBron left, the collection of players that were left were dog doo. It's that player is the reason.
Yeah, but you don't think LeBron. I don't want to put Embiid with LeBron. LeBron is as much as I'm not a huge LeBron fan. I get what he is and who he is. Right? He's a unique top Jordan-esque in that category.
Took last year, you took Kawhi off of the Raptors. That was a nice team, but they weren't a championship team. You take that guy, and when he's not there, what's left over, it turns into a nice team. The Sixers would be a nice team. They'd be a consistent playoff team with or without Joel Embiid with what's left over. But to be a championship team, you need him.
No, of course. But if they've made right moves, and it's not just the one player, my point would be they should be able, again, I think they're good enough. They should be able to beat in Atlanta this playoffs. I think that would be a success if Embiid could never come back to play this year. I think the success for the Sixers would say it's really disappointing he got injured, but we got to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Keep in mind, first year with Doc, he'll be, they had a short training camp and yada, yada. Yeah, you're going to get runs with Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris. That crew's going to be together for 3-4 more years, and Doc Rivers. So it would be extremely disappointing. But on the bright side, if you want to look at it, is this core should be playing together with Maxey and Thibault getting more experience with Doc Rivers. And you have Daryl Morey, probably the best executive in the league, probably running everything to keep this team relevant, I would say, for the next 10 years.
Well, and I'd say, is it more important moving forward to be the number one seed coming into the playoffs or to say play Embiid 40 of the 82 games moving forward and just say, we want him out? But then the problem is you could say that and it only takes one tweak like the other night and everything's beat up again.
Well, that's the whole thing. And then all year we complain, this is horrible. There's nobody playing. This is unwatchable. So some teams have said, oh, I don't care. I'm going to play 40 games. I don't care about my seed. The playoffs are more important. And then the league becomes an unwatchable product. And then we complain about that.
Well, the NBA could be in trouble, right? They've got to figure out a happy medium here.
It's coming to this point, Todd, and I got to run, but where it is the regular season just doesn't matter. The players have now told you the season does not matter.
Right. Do just enough to get in the playoffs.
The Nets said, we don't care. We'll be the 2 seeds. Philly, you could be the 1 seed. Don't care. We rather rest our players. And that's a big problem.
Yeah.
All right, man. Good stuff.
Good talks. I'll get back on the texter with you here shortly. If only the listeners could hear and read and watch those texts, baby. They're flying.
Ooh.
Good luck tonight with those Sixers.
All right, man. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. We ran a little long. We'll try to get Kerr in here for some NFL stuff real quick. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. It's brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan, the all-new Matt Blatt Nissan. 6211 Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township, online, mattblattnissan.com. All right, let's get into it with Geoff Kerr, CBS Sports NFL, who I think is heading to the Sixer game tonight. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe now that Embiid's out, Kerr said, the heck with this. If Embiid's out, I'm not going. What's going on, man?
I actually sold my tickets way before all this happened. So, yeah, I'll be going to hopefully game one of the next series. I'm a little upset Joel Embiid can't go a week without getting hurt, though.
Yeah, right. It's unbelievable. We had the doc on earlier. He said 2 to 3 weeks, best case scenario. Doesn't see that happening. I don't know, man. Feels like this is one of those things like, hey, you can't have nice things in Philadelphia, man.
No, you can't. And this isn't like, Carson Wentz getting hurt and Nick Foles coming in. You just can't replace Joel Embiid.
No, you can't. All right, let's get into a couple things. Talk about replacing. We think Dallas Goedert is going to be replacing Zach Ertz as the top target at tight end, but it looks like they could be talking about a contract extension here.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if a contract extension was done for Goddard, honestly, before the season started, because the Eagles made it clear last year with Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert is going to be the number one tight end of this team. And we talked about yesterday, Mike, who's going to be the number two tight end. But really, it's going to come down to get Dallas Goedert signed. He's a top 10 tight end in this league. He's a top 10 blocker. He's a top 10 pass catcher. Is he ever going to be the player Zach Ertz is? I don't think so, but it's not like the Eagles are going to pay this guy a king's ransom here. I think, but they are going to pay him what he deserves, and that's probably top 10, top 15 tight end salary.
Yeah, I was going to say, like somebody brought up, there was a text message earlier when we were talking about this, and it basically said that, Goddard's just a good player. He's not a great player, and that's the Eagles' problem. But I don't know. Where can Goddard be if he's all by himself? If he's in this offense and he's all by himself, the exact text I got to try to find. He says, basically the fact that, he's just a good player, not a great player. But I don't know if he's by himself in this offense. What's his ceiling?
Well, that's the thing, Mike. 2019, he was pretty damn good. I got to admit, he was pretty good. And, 2020, I thought he was solid too. He was definitely better than Zach Ertz. My issue is right now, I guess it's maybe the LJ Smith effect. Remember when LJ Smith, was a second-round pick and we needed to find out what the Eagles have with him, and LJ Smith just never lived up to the hype. That's just the bottom line. He wasn't even a good player. He was a below-average player. I think Dallas Goedert is going to be a little better than that. I like to see what he could do by himself. I think he's a 60-catch, 700, 800-yard guy, maybe even more than that because he's better at yards after the catch than Zach Ertz. But if the Eagles sign him to say, I don't know, I'm just going to throw a number out here. 4 years, $27, $28 million, and he has a big year, like 60 catches, 900 yards, what normal good tight ends are doing these days. That's a heck of a value for a guy that you drafted in the second round and you're not giving that much money to.
Yeah, the text message said the problem with the Eagles, Goddard is an okay player, not a Pro Bowler. They have veterans that are not Pro Bowlers anymore and youth that are okay players, not good enough. I don't know. I think if Goddard is by himself in this offense, you probably see a Pro Bowl tight end. Now, does that mean he puts up the production that Ertz did? We all remember Ertz had that one monster year, record-setting year. But I think Goddard can be maybe not the 118 catch guy, but I think he can be the other Ertz years. He's pretty good, Goddard, man.
The thing is, when Ertz had 116 catches, he should have had a lot more yards than he did. And I'm not blaming Zach Ertz for that. I mean, Carson Wentz had an injured back, and literally Zach Ertz was the only guy he could go to. But Dallas Goedert, man, this guy can just create big plays once he gets the football in his hands. And that's the one thing I want to see here. I think Dallas Goedert can be such a valuable weapon for Jalen Hurts, especially how much he scrambles around here. And that's what I want to find out. I think Dallas Goedert is a little better than people think. I get fan skepticism. I really do, because I have it at times. I don't think he'll ever reach that level of Zach Ertz, but I think he's going to provide different value in a bunch of different ways. For example, I think he is such an underrated blocking tight end. It's not even funny.
Geoff Kerr, CBS Sports. Couple quickies here. If Zach Ertz is still here, but if they do move him, they'll get some salary cap relief. What comes next after they move Ertz? Then what?
Well, you got to get another tight end in here. You just can't go with Jason Kroom or Hakeem Butler or whoever.
Get another corner?
Yeah, they got to get another corner too. That's the other. Honestly, corner is the number one priority, but you could sign Richard Rodgers or Trey Burton really cheap here. I mean, how much is Richard Rodgers actually going to cost you? Maybe at most $2 million.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's amazing this guy isn't signed yet.
Right now, Eagles have 8.2 available in salary cap because of yesterday's June 1st. Is that attractive enough to say, Steve Nelson, come play here?
I think they're going to need to do a little more, obviously, and I think they will. I forget one of the reports today. I saw that they maneuvered some more cap space around. So again, they might get to about $9-10 million by tomorrow. But $8.2 million. Again, you got to sign the draft picks too, Mike. I think they got to clear up some more cap space going forward. But I think $8.2 million it might just be enough to attract Steven Nelson. I just think they want to create more room on the books.
Over at CBS Sports NFL, you guys ranked the trios in the NFL. Eagles trio of Hurts, Sanders, and Goddard was their top receiving target. Now, they did say in there that Devonta Smith could take over that spot. Came in number 26 overall as a triplet. Too harsh or about right?
Actually, I helped vote on this with Jared Dubin, who wrote this. I thought it was fair. I think my final ranking for them when I ranked all 32 was 24. So that's where they kind of ended up. And yeah, if Devonta Smith was in there, I think I would have ranked them a little bit higher. But again, we kind of did like a rookie scale on this. And we're like, well, Dallas Goedert probably is going to be their top tight end back. I think that's fair for them because Hurts is more of an unproven. Miles Sanders, again, he's a home run threat, but we haven't seen everything out of Miles Sanders yet. And he didn't have a great year catching the ball last year. Not the year I thought he was going to have. And Goddard, again, we just don't know if he's a full-time player yet. So I still think there's this ranking can definitely improve, no doubt. But as of right now, 26, I think that's fair going forward.
Over at ESPN.com, they said Anthony Harris is one of the best upgrades over Jalen Mills in football. Are we not valuing the signing of Harris enough, Geoff?
I don't think we are because the Eagles free agency was so quiet, Mike. If you remember correctly, remember Anthony Harris was signed like on a Friday night. It was almost like a Friday news dump. We're like, wait a minute, the Eagles paid money for a player, and it was like $5 million for Anthony Harris. And we're like, okay, this is a pretty good signing here. And he fits Sean McGann, Steven. It's definitely an upgrade over Jalen Mills. There's no doubt about that. It just all depends how Rodney McLeod recovers from his injury.
Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports here on the Sports Pass Live on 97.3 ESPN as the NFL news continues. The Eagles, by the way, Dallas Goedert did say today that they are trying to work on something. He said, hey, I'd like to stay here, for the rest of my career. So it sounds like they're going to try to get something done. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. But what about the outlook here on what Jalen Hurts will have with Goddard, with Sanders, with, as you mentioned, with Devonta Smith, Jalen Reagor? To me, is Hurts getting enough national pub for what he could do this season?
I don't think so. Honestly, Mike, I think it's more of if Hurts is getting the national pub, it's will he be the starting quarterback in 2022? Well, let's get through 2021 first before we even think of that because Joe Flacco is not unseeing this man for the job. This team is Jalen Hurts for the 2021 season and honestly is the best case scenario for Jalen Hurts and for the Eagles. This year is a good year for them to pretty much, just see what they got in this guy. I mean, we got to be honest here with Jalen Hurts. He is getting a full opportunity to win the starting job. And if not, you have 2, potentially 3 first-round picks to get a quarterback next year. You're going to have a Spencer Rattler in there, a Sam Howell. That's when you'll find out what you have with this team. But if Jalen Hurts can guide this team to 8-9 wins and play well in the process, not fumble the ball, not have a low completion percentage, do better on deep passes, he's going to be the quarterback in 2022. It's basically a 17-game tryout for Jalen Hurts.
By the way, Rodney says, sweet shirt Geoff has on. Oh, I got that shirt too. It just didn't fit me.
It did fit you. It fits me perfectly. I love it.
It was a nice one. I actually sold it on Poshmark. Somebody bought it.
There you go.
Yeah, man. It was a hot seller.
Did you get the snake shirt?
Did I get the snake shirt? Did it come in this year? Then no.
Yeah. It came in this year. It was black, and it got like the join or die, like the Union snake. But
I would like that one.
It's really awesome.
Yeah, I did get that summer 76 shirt, but everybody on it's like Al Horford, Josh Richardson. They're all kind of holding arms in the sun, and then you got Joel Embiid. And is it Tobias or Ben? Because Ben's going to play in the playoffs last year.
Yeah. It was depressing last year. Last year they lose what's his face? Ben, and this year it looks like they're going to lose Joel. This team can't catch a break.
Real quick, James Gatling, Geoff, what do you think about Gilmore?
Honestly, I just don't see the Patriots trading him. I mean, the Patriots are buyers for
a lot of talk.
What's that?
A lot of talk about, I know.
Yeah, there is a lot of talk. I mean, we'll see. But again, I wouldn't be shocked if they moved on from this point. It just seems like the Patriots are a little all in this year. Maybe after this season.
All right. He's Geoff Kerr, CBS Sports, at Geoff Kerr CBS. And, of course, he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotlines. All right, we got to him a little late, but still a quickie and a goodie from Geoff. Thanks, man.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks, Mike. Talk to you Friday.
Right. He, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. He'll be back on Friday's show as we do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday with Geoff throughout the NFL offseason here. And he'll be on in season as well here on the Sports Bash. We've got some other plans that Geoff and I are going to do a lot more NFL coverage for you guys out there. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. And when we come back, we had great guests today. McGarry, Hudrick, Mosher, Rank, and that man right there, Geoff Kerr. What was the best sound of the day? Find out next. All right, that means we're almost out of time. So what do we got today? Dr. Jeremy Boyd, what is the timetable that we could see a return from one Joel Embiid back on the floor this year? He joined us earlier today, Dr. Jeremy Boyd from Trifecta Therapeutics, and told us what is the realistic timetable that it would take for a guy like Embiid to get back.
It really depends on how he tolerates things. I typically, most athletes shouldn't, push past a 6 or 8 out of 10 pain. So really that's one thing, and that's very subjective on the client. But he's got to, go through all his return to sport things. So probably the earliest would probably be a thing in 2 weeks. And if that's at the end of the playoffs, the championships in July. So we're coming kind of close, and that would be the earliest probably. And then anything past that, you're probably looking more at the the month marker.
Yeah, he said about a month. That's what it sounded like to me. About a month.
I heard 2 weeks to a month. That's what I'm taking from, because at the end of the day,
2 weeks on the best side, but more likely a month.
Because first of all, let's not forget, he took that picture. Joel Embiid's not stupid. He got a picture with himself after the MRI with a knee sleeve on. I don't think that was a coincidence. I think that they know what they're doing. Sixers, him. I think that it's not going to be more than what he's talking about. I think in 2 weeks to 4 weeks sounds about right.
Well, 2 weeks, okay. 4 weeks, you might not be here anymore.
You might not, but you know what? It is what it is, right?
Oh, I mean, you can't change it. There's nothing you can do about it. But if I'm measuring my expectations and he's not here, my expectations are, if it's on the 4 week side, we won't see him again because this team won't be around.
I think that they can beat, whether it's the Knicks or the Hawks, in the second round without Embiid. It just might take 7 games.
Possible. And then, of course, you're playing in the next series with a less than 100% Joel Embiid.
Yeah.
Which,
so,
I mean, what's better than the alternative? Sure.
Hey, if you got to the conference finals this year, isn't that what the goal was all along? At least get there?
Well, I mean, at the beginning of the season, right, this team was a 6 seed last year.
Right.
So if I told you about the 1 seed, it made it to the conference finals, yeah, successful year. But now you're the 1 seed, but you lose Joel Embiid. These things always have these variables that just trust the process.
That's what Joel Embiid said.
Trust the process. Oh, man. What do you got coming up tonight?
Weinberg, Wednesday, 6:15. Report from the Wells Fargo Center. Kevin McCormick, 6:40 tonight.
That's on Game Night, which is coming up next right here. Don't forget, you can watch Game Night through our YouTube channel, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm Mike Gill. Josh Edding produced today's show. I'm back tomorrow. Reaction. I think the Sixers win this series and end it tonight.